Chapter 304. Regret. Chu Qingning raised his eyebrows and stepped on the fat servant's chest. He laughed and said, "I have never regretted in my life. Can you show me regret?" The fat servant was stepped on and vomited blood. He was terrified and wanted to escape with his hands. "Madman, you are a madman. You dare to treat me like this. My He family is not easy to deal with." You wait. Bang. Noisy. Chu Qingning impatiently slapped the fat servant unconscious. The rest of the servants saw that he was so miserable. They crawled and gathered together. They didn't dare to say a word, which was similar to those frightened diners just now. Finally, it's quiet. Chu Qingning glanced at the diners who had almost run away. He turned back and asked, "Brother Luo, where are we going next?" Luo Yichen's eyes narrowed slightly. He thought for a moment and said, "Brother Chu, please deal with these people. Before we start, I want to go to my home first." Chu Qingning smiled and said, "Hey, it's easy. You go home first. After we've dealt with these people, we can ask around and we'll be able to find you." Luo Yichen went out and took off a black cloth hat from Yun Yi's horse. Then he disappeared in the street. Yun Yi glanced at the trembling innkeeper and put 3 golden leaves on the counter. He said lightly, "It's none of your business." When the innkeeper saw the golden leaves, his gray eyes immediately brightened. These 3 golden leaves were enough to buy 10 inns as big as his. With the money, he could completely change a place to make a comeback. Thinking of this, the innkeeper suppressed the fear in his heart and thanked Yun Yi repeatedly. After dealing with the affairs of the inn, Yun Yi walked to the backyard and saw a group of servants of the He family who had been tightly tied up. He nodded and said, "It's okay to leave them here for at least half a day. Let's go to the Luo family." When Chu Qingning heard this, he immediately shook his head and said, "Hey, don't worry. Let's have a drink here and leave in 2 hours. Luo Yichen obviously wants to go back alone. Isn't it inappropriate for us to go now?" Yun Yi was slightly stunned. Thinking of the situation when Luo Yichen left, he couldn't help sighing with emotion. "I didn't expect you to be so careful." Chu Qingning was unhappy when he was drinking. He said, "What are you talking about? I have always been so excellent, okay? It's just that Su Li and Fang Yuan have no chance to perform." Yun Yi couldn't help laughing. He also sat down, poured a glass of wine, and slowly tasted it. He didn't argue with Chu Qingning anymore. In the eastern part of Fallen Moon City, there was a house that looked a bit old. At this moment, the door to the courtyard was open, and lanterns and streamers could be seen everywhere. Servants and maids in new clothes came and went, as well as guests dressed in luxurious clothing. An old butler stood at the door, constantly nodding and bowing as he received guests. Although there was a smile on his face, it was even uglier than crying, and there was even helplessness between his brows. His eyes were gray and muddy, as if he had lost the spirit, energy, and spirit that he relied on to comfort himself. The guests seemed to be too lazy to bother with him and walked straight into the courtyard. Alas, the Mrs. Marriage will completely ruin this family. The old butler sighed deeply. Suddenly, he felt that the light in front of him dimmed. He looked up and saw a tall man in black in front of him. The man wore a black bamboo hat with a long sword on his waist, and his face couldn't be seen clearly. This child. Luo Yichen stared at the wrinkled old man in front of him and didn't answer. In the past 7 years, the hale and hearty Butler Wu in his memory had become so old. Butler Wu stared at him. Although the figure of the man in front of him was very strange, somehow he felt a sense of familiarity from the bottom of his heart. The first master? How could it be possible? The first master had passed away for 7 years. The miss was unwilling to set up a memorial tablet. She had asked people to look for him secretly these years, but they couldn't even find his shadow. If the first master was still alive, how could there be no news from him? Thinking of this, Butler Wu couldn't help but smile bitterly and asked, "Child, are you also here for the banquet?" Luo Yichen was excited, but the words were suddenly stuck in his throat. He couldn't say it. There was a rare trace of fear in his heart. In the hearts of the family, he might have died long ago. After all the troubles in those years were caused by him killing He Jinling in a rage. Now he suddenly appeared. What would the reaction of his parents and sister be? Would they be happy or resentful? Seeing that Luo Yichen didn't respond for a long time, Butler Wu only thought that he was a cold guest. He immediately made a gesture and reminded him, "Child, please take a seat. The banquet is about to begin. However, in order to avoid making others unhappy, you'd better take off the bamboo hat." Hearing this, Luo Yichen pulled the bamboo hat lower and said in a hoarse voice, "I won't go in. Which family does Luo Yingying marry?" At this moment, he had made up his mind. If his sister married a good family and the family situation was also good, there was no need for him to break the rare peace. After getting rid of the He family, he could secretly support them and end the cause and effect. Butler Wu was stunned when he heard Luo Yichen's question. Immediately his expression changed. He murmured in surprise and doubt, "Child Fan hasn't given up yet?" No, Child Fan has long been under house arrest." Although there were many people at this moment, and Butler Wu's murmur was as low as a mosquito, Luo Yichen still heard it clearly. "Child Fan? Fan Tianxing?" Butler Wu was shocked when he heard it. His eyes lit up. "Child Fan really sent you?" Then he cautiously glanced at the courtyard. Seeing that the guests hadn't noticed them, he immediately pulled Luo Yichen to the courtyard next door. "Come with me." Luo Yichen frowned and let Butler Wu pull him to a place with fewer people. Then he asked, "What the hell is going on? Why is Tianxing under house arrest when Yingying is married?" Butler Wu was nervous and didn't notice that Luo Yichen called him intimately. He hurriedly said, "Since you are the helper invited by Child Fan, don't think so much. Take Miss away quickly." "Go." Luo Yichen stopped and said coldly, "Why? Where are you going?" When Luo Yichen stopped, Butler Wu, who was in a hurry, stopped abruptly. Hearing Luo Yichen's tone, Butler Wu blamed the person invited by Child Fan for being unreliable. But he could only explain, after old master fell ill, Miss was the only backbone of the family. How could she get married? Father fell ill. 7 years had passed, and she was already 24 years old. For the sake of the family, she had never married. When Luo Yichen heard the news, he was slightly shocked and his blood was boiling. This time, Miss was forced to get married by the He family. Child Fan was so angry that he wanted to save Mississippi. But before he could do it, he was under house arrest by the family. So, Miss had no choice but to agree to He family's request on the surface. In fact, she had been waiting for Child Fan to send someone to save her. Luo Yichen took a deep breath. He family? He Jinling is dead. Is there any man in He family? Seeing that Luo Yichen still had questions, Butler Wu was anxious and complained, "Oh, you are paid to do things. Just go with me. When did I say that Miss was going to marry He family? He family specially found a ruffian to humiliate Mississippi. If you don't go now, it will be too late after the banquet ends." It turned out to be like this. Luo Yichen's expression changed immediately. He reached out to lift Butler Wu and rushed to the backyard as fast as lightning. Butler Wu rode on the cloud and dizzily saw the surrounding scene shaking. Then he arrived in front of Mrs. Yard. He couldn't help but be shocked and then overjoyed. Child Fan could invite such a master. Miss would be saved. At this moment, he was ecstatic, and he didn't feel strange that a stranger could be so familiar with the layout of Luo family. Yingying still lives here. Luo Yichen stood still and put down Butler Wu. A trace of reminiscence flashed through his eyes. Then he pushed the door and walked into the yard. At this moment, he didn't hesitate anymore. Butler Wu happily walked to the door and laughed. Miss, Child Fan's people are here. Butler Wu, come in with that gentleman." As soon as he finished speaking, a female voice came from the room, which made Luo Yichen slightly absent-minded. The voice was still the same, but the tone of speaking was completely different from 7 years ago. It was less naive and weak, but more strong and sophisticated. How did a 17-year-old girl support this family under the He family's strife for 7 years? He couldn't imagine. Creak. The wooden door made a light sound. The person in the room came into view, which made Butler Wu and Luo Yichen stunned at the same time. The girl sitting at the dressing table was wearing a phoenix crown and a red cape. Her makeup was exquisite, and she was extremely beautiful. But different from those delicate ladies, her lips were tightly closed, and her eyes were firm, as if she wouldn't change her expression even if a mountain collapsed in front of her. At this moment, Luo Yichen actually saw the shadow of Su Li in her. "Miss, why are you still wearing this? Didn't I prepare maid clothes for you?" Butler Wu was so anxious that his forehead was sweating. He rushed into the room to find maid clothes for Luo Yingying to change into. Luo Yingying shook her head and stopped him. Her eyes were firm and calm. "I won't leave. If I leave, he family will be angry. What about father? What about you?" Then she looked at Luo Yichen, who stood still at the door, and apologized. "I'm so sorry to let you come here in vain. Please thank Child Fan for me. Thanks to his protection these years, our Luo family can continue to survive. But this time, Yingying can't hurt him no matter what." Although the Fan family was quite powerful, they were no match for the mighty He family, who was a relative of the emperor. The head of the Fan family, who had always doted on his son, had seen this, which was why he had ruthlessly imprisoned Fan Tianxing. Luo Yichen was silent, and his body didn't move at all. Seeing that, Luo Yingying was confused and said again, "Your Excellency?" This time, there was finally a response. Luo Yichen moved. He slowly walked to the front of his mother's memorial tablet, which he saw at a glance when he entered the room. Under Luo Yingying's puzzled gaze, he silently burned an incense stick and finally said, "When did mother die?" Chapter 305. Luo Yingying stared blankly at the back of the figure that was facing her. The more she looked at that tall and straight figure, the more familiar it became. Finally, it gradually overlapped with the youth in her memory. Was it him? Was it the one who had been dead for 7 years in her memory? Luo Yingying's eyes turned red instantly. She subconsciously took 2 steps forward and suddenly stopped. Her lips trembled. She pointed to the memorial tablet and asked again and again, What did you call her?" Alas, Luo Yichen sighed with mixed feelings under the black bamboo hat. He slowly turned around and took off the bamboo hat, trying to make himself smile more naturally. "Little sister, I'm back. Don't." The dagger hidden in the sleeve fell to the ground, making a dull sound. When she saw that angular and mature face, her first reaction wasn't joy. Instead, her beautiful face paled and she staggered backwards. "Be careful." Luo Yichen immediately whispered and flashed forward to hold her arms. As soon as they touched, Luo Yingying retracted her hands as if she got an electric shock. Then she seemed to realize something in the air. Just now, she seemed to have touched a real person. Was it not an illusion? Luo Yingying hesitated for a moment. Looking at Luo Yichen, who was confused and distressed in front of her, she seemed to summon up great courage. She bit her lips and slowly touched his cheek with her delicate palm. At that moment, a real and warm feeling spread through her entire body. Tears blurred her eyes, shattering all the strength she had put up. "I'm not dreaming. It's true, eldest brother, eldest brother. Why didn't you come back for so many years? I thought you were dead. 7 years. 7 years." Luo Yingying hugged Luo Yichen tightly and buried her head in his chest. The whisper gradually turned into a heart-wrenching cry. All kinds of sufferings in the past 7 years broke out like a mountain torrent. Luo Yichen's eyes were red and his throat was choked. He could only let Luo Yingying hold him and couldn't say a word. Butler Wu, who stood aside for a long time, couldn't help crying when he saw the brother and sister repeating the same words. "God bless, young master is still alive, it's good that he's alive." Suddenly, Uncle Wu thought of something and his face changed. He didn't want to disturb the reunion of the two. He went up and said, "First, young master, miss, we can talk about it later. We can't stay here. Let's hurry up and escape." Luo Yingying raised her head with a start and also reacted. She hurriedly said, "Big brother, hurry up and hide. If the He family finds out that you're still alive, it'll be terrible. As for me..." Then she looked at Luo Yichen reluctantly with tears in her beautiful eyes. She gritted her teeth and said, "I appreciate your kindness, but I can't go." When Uncle Wu heard this, he sighed sorrowfully. He was about to say something when an exasperated scream suddenly came from outside the house. "None of you can leave." Before he finished his words, A large group of people rushed into the room aggressively. Luo Yichen actually knew the leader. It was he, Luo Mei, who made trouble in Tianjin before. Sure. Luo Yichen, how dare you swagger back after being sent to the frontier? Do you think the law of Tianji country is just for show? He, Luo Mei, sneered and waved her hand. She said, take him back and send him to the government office for punishment. He, Luo Mei. Luo Yingying said with a cold face, this is the Luo family. How can you mess around here? He is just a senior invited by child fan. I won't go with him. Why do you vent your anger on innocent people? He, Luo Mei, seemed to have heard an extremely funny joke. She held her belly and laughed. After a long time, she was out of breath and mocked. Miss Luo, do I look so easy to be deceived? Just now when I was outside, I heard it clearly. You called me Big Brother, so intimately. I almost cried when I heard it. It turns out that you have already arrived. Luo Yingying looked solemn and stood in front of Luo Yichen to protect him. She said, if you want to catch my big brother, you have to step over my dead body. He Jinwei wants to humiliate me. If you kill me, I'm afraid it's not easy to explain. He, Luo Mei, snorted, naive. Do you want to stop me? Go and control Luo Yingying first. After giving the order, he, Luo Mei, waited for a long time, but there was no movement behind her. Her face suddenly darkened. She turned around and scolded, what are you waiting for? Are you stupid? The middle-aged guard frowned and still didn't move. He, Luo Mei, was a shrew. She didn't recognize Luo Yichen, but it didn't mean that he had no impression. He remembered that when they were in the Tianji Inn, Luo Yichen stood very close to the young man. He thought that his status must be high. And he also heard that the girl had a close relationship with the fourth prince. No, now it should be the crown prince. Just when he was hesitating, he, Luo Mei, almost went crazy and scolded, how dare you? How dare you? A mere guard dares to disobey my orders. All of you go. He doesn't want to live. Do you want to die with him? Hearing this, the other guards who were still listening to the middle-aged guard suddenly moved. Luo Yingying's face turned pale. Her cultivation was just in the acquired realm. She couldn't resist so many warriors of the inborn realm. Little sister, stand with Butler Wu. Don't run around. Suddenly, an extremely soft force dragged her to Butler Wu. Then she saw Luo Yichen's figure flashed out like a flickering light. The sword at his waist suddenly soared and crossed the void. Puff, puff, puff. There were 3 light sounds. The heads of the 3 guards who rushed in the front fell. I know. It's a senior. Retreat. The rest of the warriors of the inborn realms suddenly changed their faces and retreated quickly. But Luo Yichen, who was full of killing intent, wouldn't let them go. He snorted and floated to catch up with them. In the blink of an eye, he stopped in front of them and waved his sword. From the moment you decided to take action, you should be prepared to be killed. Now go to hell. Luo Yichen looked indifferent. He pierced the chest of the nearest guard with his sword and cut off half of the cheek of another guard. It was like cutting melons and vegetables. He killed most of the guards in a short time. Run. Mercy, I won't work for he family anymore. Mercy. No matter how the rest begged, he only got a decisive sword in response. The middle-aged guard stood aside and even breathed carefully. He hoped that his existence could be minimized. He stared blankly at the one-sided massacre in the courtyard. He felt a chill run down his spine and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. This person was definitely an expert at the peak of the innate realm. If he had attacked just now, he would have become one of the corpses. The girl, who is she? The middle-aged guard was frightened and suddenly connected the recent events together. Not long after the girl came to Tantai City, the fourth prince was appointed as the crown prince. Intuition told him that this time he family absolutely provoked a monster that absolutely couldn't be provoked. After a quarter of an hour, the courtyard was silent. Except for the middle-aged guard who was wise to protect himself and he Luo Mei who was scared, there were no living things. Eldest brother. Luo Yingying ran out of the house in panic. Looking at the hellish scene in the courtyard, her pretty face was paler than white paper. You killed people again, and so many people. Eldest young master, The He family will definitely not let this go. Take advantage of the fact that Luoyue City has not been sealed yet. You should quickly escape. Butler Wu was frightened, but he had rich life experience, so his reaction was much smaller than Luo Yingying's. He stepped forward to persuade him. Clang! Luo Yichen swung his long sword, and the blood dripped off the sword. It was as clear as a pool of water. He put the long sword into the sheath unhurriedly. After releasing his depression, his whole spirit had a slight change. He walked to his sister with a faint smile, touched her head, and said softly, "Eldest brother is not the same as before. This time, no matter how many people you kill, nothing will happen." Luo Yingying shook her head desperately, and her voice was trembling with fear. "Eldest brother, you don't understand at all. He family has become more powerful these years. You can't deal with them alone. Don't try to be brave anymore. Go." Luo Yichen was stunned and then nodded. "You're right. I haven't reached the longevity realm yet. With so many people, I may not be their opponents." Speaking of this, Luo Yichen smiled lovingly. "When did you say that you are fighting alone?" Luo Yingying was stunned. But at this moment, a long laugh suddenly sounded from outside the courtyard. "Ha ha ha, Brother Luo, I'm not late, am I?" At the same time, a group of young people, who were about the same age as Luo Yingying's eldest brother, came in. The leader of the group was smiling, and it was obvious that he was an extroverted man. "Eldest brother, these people," Luo Yingying said hesitantly. When Luo Yichen did not answer, Chu Qingning immediately said, "Hey, this is little sister Yingying, right? She is really beautiful. I feel happy just by looking at her. If I marry her..." Hey. Seeing Chu Qingning's excessive words, Luo Yingying blushed and looked up at Luo Yichen for help. "Eldest brother." Luo Yichen's smile remained unchanged and he said, "These words must be your heartfelt words. I will definitely convey them to Miss Yin." Chu Qingning's face instantly darkened, and he quickly pulled Luo Yichen's sleeve. "Brother, don't. You know that I just said it for fun. Don't let my wife hear what I said just now, or I will have no pocket money next month." "Ha." Chu Qingning was so cowardly that Luo Yingying was immediately amused. She was relieved. It turned out that Chu Qingning's character was very interesting. However, when she thought of the He family, she couldn't help but worry. Fang Mu was careful and he couldn't help but say with a smile, "Miss Luo, don't worry. The He family can't do anything in front of our Linli building. Just wait and see." Although Luo Yingying was still worried in her heart, she couldn't show her worry on the surface. She could only nod. Chu Qingning knew what she was thinking at a glance, and immediately said to Luo Yichen, "It seems that your depression is almost gone after the killing. Solve the matter first, and then come back to chat with your sister." Luo Yichen nodded slightly, and his eyes flashed with killing intent. Chapter 306. In the best part of the west of Luoyue City, there was a huge manor that occupied 70% of the area. The owner of this manor was undoubtedly the overlord of Luoyue City, the He family, which had many empresses and concubines. At this moment, in the originally peaceful manor, a large number of family guards and masters fell down in disorder. Only a small group of He family seniors were caught and driven to the front hall square. Not long after, a group of women from the He family who were hiding in the backyard also rushed over in a panic. Among them, the great imperial concubine who had married the great prince, Hiyulan, who was dressed in a red dress, was among them. Hiyulan was pushed forward by Fang Mu indifferently. She slipped and fell in front of Heluan, the master of He family. Heluan was shocked and quickly stepped forward to support his daughter. He was so angry that he almost went crazy. He pointed at Fang Mu and shouted, "How dare you? How dare you? In broad daylight, you dare to break into the Prime Minister's mansion and hurt the first princess. No matter who is behind you, don't think about leaving Tianji country alive." Chu Qingning clicked his tongue and played with the long knife. He shook his head and walked to the two of them, saying, "Old guy, you really dare to say that? Aren't you afraid that we will kill you all and leave directly?" Heluan's face was slightly pale, but his tone did not soften. He sneered, "No, you dare not. Luoyue City is not far from Tantai City. If you really dare to do that, you will also die with me. Chu Qingning sneered. Master He, I advise you not to say too much. Be careful of retribution. Let's not talk about how useful your unfavored daughter of the Empress can be. Even your father is getting old now. I think the position of the Prime Minister should be changed to someone else. Nonsense. He Luan scolded without thinking. The national affairs of Tianji country are not decided by you, a young boy. Forget it. It's really boring to talk to an old fool. I'd better let the person who makes the decision today come and talk to you. Chu Qingning left with a smile. His words made He Luan's heart sink. If this person was not the person who made the decision, who made the decision? Although he was full of confidence just now, he was actually very confused and flustered. Just half a quarter of an hour ago, this group of young people came to fight without saying a word. The martial arts masters in the mansion who could fight against 10 people were as weak as paper in front of more than a dozen of them. They couldn't even resist one move at all, so they were all caught before they had time to escape into the tunnel. How terrifying would a force that could gather so many young experts together be? Of course, he didn't know that Su Li trained these people to deal with the terrible forces with at least the longevity realm stationed in the future. To deal with a medium family in the secular world, it was like killing a chicken with a butcher's knife. Just when He Luan was thinking, Luo Yichen stood out from the crowd with his sister. All the He family's eyes immediately focused on them. When He Yulan saw Luo Yingying's familiar face, her expression immediately changed and she exclaimed, You aren't. In the middle of her words, her eyes fell on Luo Yichen's face, which was somewhat similar to Luo Yingying's. She suddenly thought of something and suddenly realized. Her face instantly became extremely ugly. So it's you, Luo Yichen. You didn't die. He Lun was slightly shocked when he heard the words. He stared at Luo Yichen and said, It's you, the bastard who killed Ling. A sneer appeared on Luo Yichen's indifferent face. He said coldly, Why? Your son died, but I didn't. Are you very disappointed? You still have the face to show up in my He family? He Yulan screamed, and her words were full of hatred. My brother was young and handsome. If he hadn't died in your hands, he would have been a high-ranking official in the court. If it hadn't been for you, our He family wouldn't have had a descendant. Handsome? Luo Yichen seemed to have heard a joke, and the sarcasm on his face was more intense. Only the 6th Miss of He family dares to say that. 7 years ago, although I was young, I was not a hot-blooded young man. It has nothing to do with me whether your idiot brother is a rotten man or not. Unfortunately, he should have the idea of my sister. Speaking of this, Luo Yichen looked cold. When my scapula was pierced, I could not exert half of the acquired 9th hurdle strength. You sent a senior of the inborn realm to cut the weeds and dig up the roots. Unfortunately, this kid's luck was really good, and he was lucky enough to escape with his life. Over the years, I dare not forget the great kindness of Master He. Today, I finally have a chance to repay it. He Luan finally couldn't help showing a trace of panic on his face when he heard the last words. Luo Yichen, don't act recklessly. You have already committed a crime. If you regret now and let us go, it's not too late. If you do it, your Luo family will be finished, and your sister will also be implicated by you. You have to think clearly. It was true that He Luan's words were somewhat reasonable, but Luo Yichen was not the indecisive boy in those years. He didn't say a word, and the long sword was unsheathed. Swish, swish. 2 swords instantly pierced He Luan's shoulder scapula, and the extreme pain immediately made him scream. Old guy, I haven't put the chain through it, and you start to scream? The pain that I was tortured by you in those years, now I give it back to you. Enjoy. The screams echoed over the manor, mixed with the screams of fear of the women, which lasted for a long time. Chu Qingning sat in the shade of a tree, holding a watermelon and watching while eating. He didn't forget to touch Fong Mu next to him with his arm and said, I say, the words that Luo Yichen said today are more than what he said in the past year. It seems that he was really tortured by this old guy. Fong Mu was dozing off, and was woken up by Chu Qingning. He said helplessly, I heard from Butler Wu that Brother Luo's mother missed him so much that she died during these years that he left. His father was also seriously ill and seemed to be dying. Only Luo Yingying was left in such a big family. If we came a little later, Luo Yingying would marry that ruffian. I guess that when brother Luo came back, he would kill the whole He family without saying anything. You're considered lucky to be here today. Brother Luo is a little too talkative and it's only human nature. Tut, I didn't know that your speed of collecting information is getting faster and faster. Chu Qingning stared at Fang Mu in surprise, and then stopped talking, quietly waiting for Luo Yichen to finish. Half a day later, it was evening. The setting sun was like blood, which made the bloodstains in the manor more magnificent. Luo Yichen put the long sword into the sheath, and his blood and qi lingered. He stared at the manor square that had been completely quiet, and a sense of relief and disappointment rose in his heart. The goal that had supported him to practice hard for a long time suddenly disappeared, and he would inevitably be confused. At this moment, Luo Yingying gently wrapped her arms around his shoulders, sending him a silent comfort. Eldest brother, you have done enough. Let's go home. Hearing this, Luo Yichen smiled warmly and said, Okay, let's go home. Chu Qingning, who was still cleaning up the mess, stood up and watched Luo Yichen leave from the gate of He family. Looking at the corpses in the square, he couldn't help but pout. Killing is addictive. It seems that after going back this time, both we and Luo Yichen should have a good rest. Fang Mu nodded gently, and at the same time, there were different thoughts in his mind. Their desire to kill skyrocketed. It seemed to have a greater relationship with Su Li. Since the morning of the rainstorm, Sister Su Li came back seriously injured, and her style of doing things has become more and more unscrupulous. Fang Mu sighed deeply, and then his eyes became firm. After the cause and effect were settled, as long as Sister Su Li said, they would execute it without hesitation. They didn't need to think about other things. This was also the only meaning of living in the second half of their lives. He believed that not only himself, but also his eldest brother, Brother Chu, and Brother Luo had the same idea as him. At this moment, Su Li, who was missed by Fang Mu, was in the East Palace of the Tianji country. However, she appeared in the identity of Mr. Li. As the night fell, the palace lanterns on the roadside were lit. The East Palace was brightly lit as if it were daytime. Su Li walked to the window and looked at the bright moon hanging high in the sky. She narrowed her eyes slightly. Tan Taiyu followed her step by step with a helpless look. He didn't resist as he did when he met Mr. Li an hour ago. The reason that made him lose his resistance was very simple. One sentence was enough. The royal family of Nanjiang country is not willing to listen to my orders. I killed them all and replaced another family. If you don't want to be a sinner of the Tantai family, be obedient. After a long silence in the palace, Su Li retracted her gaze and looked at Tan Taiyu, who pretended to be respectful and accompanied her. With her keen psychic sense, she could feel the unwillingness around Tan Taiyu, which was as striking as a lighthouse in the dark. She smiled slightly and said, "Do you remember what I just said?" Tan Taiyu immediately nodded and said in a deep voice, "I will try to improve the strength of the palace guards of sacrifice in a short period of time, select 100,000 elite soldiers for intensive training, and wait for your orders at any time. I remember all these." "Very good." Su Li turned around and left a sentence. Then she left from the main hall of the East Palace. "If those people are used up, I will give them to you. If there are any left, I will give them to you. It won't be long before you become the real monarch of Tianji country. I don't have much time." Tan Taiyu followed Su Li to the door of the main hall. Seeing Su Li's figure in his sight, he finally breathed a long sigh of relief. Although Mr. Li did not show any momentum from beginning to end, his back was already wet. "Brother, are you okay?" Tan Tai Mingyue came from the corner of the palace and said with a worried face, "You shouldn't resist that man. It's not bad for you to agree." "I know. I will bear it." Tan Taiyu took a deep breath and said with bright eyes, "I will listen to him. He can destroy Nanjiang country, so he can destroy my Tianji country. There is no need for such a person to deceive me. Why should I sacrifice my future for a dying person?" Chapter 307. The next morning, Tan Taiyu was pulled up from the bed by Tan Tai Mingyue when he was in a daze. Second sister, what happened? Why are you in such a hurry? There were 2 dark circles under Tan Taiyu's eyes. He thought too much these days. He didn't fall asleep until the latter half of the night yesterday. He just slept for less than 4 hours. Tan Tai Mingyue didn't care so much. She held the crown prince's clothes and urged, "Get up." This morning, father suddenly announced that the empress was banished to the cold palace. What? Tan Taiyu woke up and couldn't believe it. He Jinwei was banished to the cold palace? Tan Tai Mingyue nodded cautiously. I have been to the Qiankuan palace. It has been blocked by father. No one can see the situation inside. Didn't Prime Minister He protest? He Jinwei is his eldest granddaughter. Tan Taiyu was confused. In the past, his father tolerated He Jinwei because he was afraid of the He family. He even asked his mother to give up the position of the empress to He Jinwei. Why did he suddenly do it? Wasn't he afraid that the He family would rebel? Tan Tai Mingyue shook her head helplessly. I just got the news. How can I find out so much? But after the news came out, the He family hasn't done anything. A storm was coming. Tan Taiyu's heart sank. He put on his clothes and said seriously, I'm going to see father now. But Tan Tai Mingyue responded heavily. That was why she came to Tan Taiyu. Tan Taiyu had a good relationship with Su Li. If he went to ask, father would not refuse him. On the way, Tan Taiyu's heart was heavy. The He family was the most powerful family in Tianji country except for the royal family. The head of the family, He Tian, was over 70 years old. He was still in charge of the court. He was the prime minister of Tianji country. He Tian's eldest granddaughter, He Jinwei, became the empress of Tianji country under his operation. His youngest granddaughter, He Yulan, also became the first prince's imperial concubine. If there was no Su Li, He Yulan would be the next empress. At that time, the whole harem would belong to the He family. All this time, imperial father did not make eldest brother the crown prince, most likely because he saw this point. He originally thought that imperial father would use soft policies to slowly weaken the He family's influence, and he would do the same in the future. He did not expect that everything would happen so suddenly. When he was thinking, the imperial study was in sight. Tan Taiyu quickened his steps and walked to the door. When he was about to speak, the old eunuch guarding the door said in a sharp voice, Your Highness the Crown Prince, His Majesty has instructed that you can go in directly. This old servant reckons that His Majesty has been waiting for you. Tan Taiyu was slightly surprised and immediately said, Thank you, Eunuch Qian. Your Highness is too polite. The old eunuch smiled until the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes became wrinkles. This was the future emperor, so how could he dare to be rash? His attitude was much more respectful than before. Tan Taiyu entered the room and glanced around. He didn't see a palace maid except his father who was writing something at the desk. Secret talk? His heart tightened slightly. He walked to the open space in front of the table and respectfully bowed. This child greets imperial father. Dan Feng Feng put down the pen in his hand and looked up to see his son kneeling down. He smiled indifferently. Lucky little guy, get up. Little guy? Tan Taiyu stood up and straightened up. He was confused. His father used to call him Yu. Why did he change such a strange name today? Dan Feng Feng saw his confusion but didn't explain. He just handed over the imperial edict just written in his hand. Take it. Arrange the rest as soon as possible. Tan Taiyu was more confused. He took the imperial edict in a daze. He glanced at the content of the imperial edict inadvertently. His hands trembled and he almost threw the imperial edict away. Abdication. His father actually decided to abdicate the throne to him 5 days later. Father, why do you? Tan Taiyu was so anxious that his forehead sweated. He didn't know what to say for a while. Dan Feng Feng chuckled and shook his head slowly. Little guy, don't be afraid. I know why you come to me. It's nothing more than the He family. Do you think that I compromised before because I was afraid that the He family would rebel? Isn't it? Tan Taiyu was completely confused. If the middle-aged man in front of him didn't give him a very amiable feeling, He almost thought that his father was replaced by someone else. Of course not. After Tan Tai Fong finished speaking, he seemed to have thought of something and his expression turned cold. That kind of ant is not enough to enter my eyes. If it wasn't for Gur, why would I be so cowardly? But now, I have confirmed some things, so I have less to worry about. The existence of Jing Xian and Su Li's situation were enough to let him confirm that the real mirror spirit of the reincarnation mirror was sleeping. Even if he made a big movement, he would not be suppressed. So, he could move freely. Tan Taiyu was stunned. He opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. He didn't understand a word of what his father said just now. Moreover, his father didn't seem to be as close to his children as before. He even didn't have the habit of calling himself emperor. He faintly felt that he knew a great secret, but his father didn't tell him in detail. He only saw the tip of the iceberg and couldn't know the whole picture. After struggling for a moment, Tan Taiyu couldn't help but ask, "Father, why are you so strange today? You make me feel. Do I feel like an outsider?" Dan Fong Fong laughed, which made Tan Taiyu change his expression slightly. "That's not what I mean." "That's what you mean." Dan Fong Feng's smile remained unchanged. "In fact, you little guys are outsiders. We old guys want to be outsiders, but we can't help it." After sighing slightly, Tan Tai Fong looked at Tan Taiyu, who was more and more confused. He shook his head and smiled. "Boy, don't think too much. When the time comes, you will know something in the future. Now, it's too early. In 2 days, your mother is about to wake up. At that time, I will make her the empress again, and then you will ascend the throne. You can do whatever you want in Tianji country. Your mother and I will enjoy life in the imperial harem. Unless the country is in danger, don't disturb us." Tan Taiyu was overjoyed. He didn't find that Dan Fong Fong looked a little strange when he said, "Your mother." He responded repeatedly, "Mother is about to wake up? That's great. I'm going to prepare now." As he said, he was about to leave. When he walked to the door, he realized that he seemed to forget his original purpose after coming in. "Father," he turned his head. Before he said in detail, Tan Tai Fong said without raising his head, "Deal with the affairs of He family after you ascend the throne. You can find Commander Su for specific matters. He and the Black Scale Army will be yours in the future." Black Scale Army? The most mysterious and powerful men of sacrifice in Tan Tai family. Father actually decided to use the Black Scale Army. Tan Taiyu was slightly shocked. His worries were swept away in an instant. "Yes, father." Not long after, Tan Taiyu left the imperial study. As soon as he walked out of the imperial garden, he saw Commander Su with a serious face waiting silently in front of the palace gate. Commander Su immediately greeted him when he saw him. He saluted directly, "Your Royal Highness." Tan Taiyu was in a trance for a moment. He remembered the disappointment and disdain on Commander Su's face when he took Su Li into the palace rashly. Today, it was a completely different scene. Tan Taiyu didn't have time to sigh. He raised Commander Su's waist and said, "Commander Su, please stand up. I will rely on you and your Black Scale Army in the future." Commander Su's body was slightly stiff, but he still bent down. He said dryly, "You can't ignore the etiquette." Tan Taiyu's cultivation couldn't stop Commander Su. He had to wait for Commander Su to finish the salute. Tan Taiyu asked, "Commander Su, Father has told me to deal with the affairs of He family. How is the situation now?" Commander Su was slightly serious when he heard the words. He stretched out his hand to dismiss the accompanying Black Scale guards behind him. Tan Taiyu also dismissed all the eunuchs. In an instant, there were only 2 of them on the palace road. "Your Royal Highness, in fact, the affairs of He family are finished." Commander Su took a slight breath and said a fact that shocked Tan Taiyu. But didn't Prime Minister He know how to resist? Commander Su thought of what he saw yesterday. There was a hidden fear in his eyes. He explained in a low voice, "Your Royal Highness, you may not know. Just yesterday, all the influential people of He family disappeared mysteriously, including Queen Jinwei, who had been banished to the Cold Palace." "What did you say?" Tan Taiyu opened his eyes wide and couldn't help but raise his voice. He Jinwei was banished to the cold palace. Anyway, she was his father's woman. How could she disappear casually? At this moment, Tan Taiyu subconsciously thought of Mr. Li. Thinking of that person's great power, the shock on his face immediately faded a lot. It seems that you have understood, Your Royal Highness. Commander Su said at the right time, I heard that there is a person in the Linli building who has a deep grudge with the He family. After being valued by Mr. Li, he returned to the Tianji country and immediately killed the He family. The He family was wiped out before they could do anything. And then just yesterday, people of Linli building took He Jinwei from the palace and He Tian who was in the mansion of Tantian City. All the people in charge of the He family are gone, and the remaining people are like a group of dragons without a leader. They won't be able to stir up any waves. As long as Your Highness sends someone to clean up the mess, the great merit of killing the rebellious family will immediately be in your pocket. Commander Su's words were full of anger and expectation. Although he didn't have the right to choose his master, he also wanted to see whether the crown prince appointed by His Majesty and Mr. Li had the ability to ascend the throne. Tan Taiyu closed his eyes and sighed softly. His heart was cold. In just half a month, all the changes flashed in front of him. Finally, he fixed his eyes on Su Li's smiling face. At this moment, even if he was slow, he should be aware that the suddenly clear road in front of him was mostly related to his junior sister apprentice. Although he didn't know what the relationship between Mr. Li and Su Li was, since it was his junior sister apprentice's intention, Tan Taiyu's eyes flashed and his tone became overbearing for the first time. Chapter 308. When Tan Taiyu dealt with the affairs of the He family, it was 3 days later. After returning to the East Palace, he knew that Su Li had left the day before yesterday. He got a letter from Su Li from Tan Tai Mingyue. What was written in the letter was simple. It was about taking care of herself. It didn't mention anything about the He family or his ascension to the throne. Tan Taiyu wanted to ask her that year. Unfortunately, he was about to ascend to the throne. He had little time to sleep. How could he have time to go to Dahan country in person? As for the He family, except for some rumors that no one believed as a topic of conversation among the people, it had disappeared and became a taboo among the officials in the imperial court. A few days later, in the Ling Mansion, Yunjing City, Dahan country, Ling Yimo, who was dressed as a servant, walked into the yard with breakfast. He turned around and saw Ling Li sitting under the eaves and looking at the distance silently. Compared with half a month ago, Ling Li was obviously much thinner. Ling Yimo could feel the faint sense of irritation emanating from him from a distance. If the young madam doesn't come back, Ling Yimo shook his head slightly. He handed the plate to Mammy Li who was guarding beside him. He tightened the white ribbon on the hilt of the sword and slowly walked over. Seeing Ling Yimo, Ling Li relaxed his eyebrows and restrained his irritation slightly. He glanced at the white ribbon and said slowly, "How is it going?" Ling Yimo bowed his head slightly and said in a low voice, "The families of Liuyi have settled down. Those who have no family members are buried together with the brothers who joined the cult with them." Ling Li nodded slightly and didn't feel sad. He had been accustomed to death for many years. Ling Yimo hesitated a little and said, "The spy sent to Tianji country hasn't got the news of the young madam yet, but I heard that Tan Taiyu was appointed as the crown prince. It won't be long before he becomes the next emperor of Tianji country." Tan Taiyu? Ling Li narrowed his long and narrow eyes. He remembered that this person was Su Li's senior fellow apprentice, and he was very concerned about Su Li. Since he could be appointed as the crown prince, it showed that his power in Tianji country was very great. The possibility of Su Li encountering danger was very small. But it's been 16 days. Why didn't she send back any news? Are you going to stay in Tianji country and not come back? Ling Li muttered to himself. The more he said, the gloomier his face was. Even a trace of his pneuma leaked out and hit Ling Mo's face suddenly turned pale, and he stepped back a dozen steps to stabilize his body. "Young master," Ling Yimo shouted helplessly. He hadn't recovered from his injury, so he couldn't bear the torment. Ling Li came to his sense and saw Ling Mo's pale face. He apologized and said, "Yes, you can't use Xiangong yet. I'm sorry." Ling Mo shook his head. How could he care about such a little thing? At this time, Mammy Li came over and said, Master, breakfast is ready. Come and eat. Don't worry about Mississippi. She has to treat Lord Ling Mo. She will come back soon. She won't leave you alone. Ling Li responded with a heavy heart. Ling Mo pushed the wheelchair to send him to the table. He looked at the dishes on the table, but he had no appetite. He barely picked up a dish with chopsticks and put it in his mouth. He also felt bitter and difficult to swallow. When Su Li said that she would leave for a month, he didn't feel anything. After all, he had been to the border of Nanjiang country for many days, so he didn't think it was difficult. But he didn't expect that going out to do things and waiting at home were two completely different concepts. Only after half a month, he felt that every day was like a year. Every day, he thought about the little things with Su Li in the past half a year. He wanted to see Su Li so much that he almost went crazy. Seeing that he didn't want to eat or drink, Chiu Meng came over and said that he was lovesick. Then she put down the medicine given by the doctor and left with a smile covering her mouth. In Chiu Meng's view, her son just happened to have indigestion. In the past 10 years, he had visited more than 1,000 brothels. Even if he married a beautiful woman now, he would never be a devoted person. According to what she had seen in these years, she would never think that her sons, who had visited brothels countless times, actually kept their chastity and didn't even give their virginity. At this moment, there was a sudden noise outside the east courtyard. Ling Li raised his head and looked outside. He saw a beautiful figure that he missed so much suddenly stepped in. Ling Li was stunned, and then he couldn't help showing joy on his face. He stood up from the wheelchair and said, "You're back." Before Ling Li finished his words, he was pressed by Su Li's shoulders and sat back in the wheelchair. Then Chiu Meng followed him into the room in the next moment. Seeing that her daughter-in-law hugged her son as soon as she came back, and the couple got along well, Chiu Meng was very happy. She smiled so happily that her eyes turned into crescent moons. "Li, you went to find a way to cure Ling Mo these days, but Ling Li was worried about you. He didn't have a good meal these days, and he lost a lot of weight." Chiu Meng sat next to her and said a lot of good things about Ling Li. Ling Li's ears were red, and then she left contentedly. As soon as Chiu Meng left, Ling Li felt that the person in his arms left quickly. He couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. If he could, he would rather hold her like this and never let go of her forever. Unfortunately, he knew that everything was an illusion. Su Li glanced at Mammy Li, and the latter immediately understood and left with the rest of the maids. Except for Ling Li, only Ling Mo was left. Su Li sat down opposite the table and took out a bottle of elixir from her arms. She said, "After I went to Tianji country, I found that my master had left. But by chance, I found a suitable prescription. Ling Mo, take this bottle of elixir. Take one every day and refine it. Your meridians will be healed after 7 days. At that time, you can gradually restore Shenggong. Don't be anxious." Ling Mo's eyes brightened when he heard the words. He took the bottle respectfully and said, "Thank you for the elixir, madam." Su Li nodded and looked back to Ling Li. Under the expectant gaze of Ling Li, she quietly finished her breakfast and left without saying a word. The smile on Ling Li's face froze. After a long time, he slowly picked up the chopsticks and ate up every plate of breakfast that Su Li had tasted. Ling Mo held the elixir and watched those sweet snacks being stuffed into Ling Li's mouth by Ling Li. No matter how he looked at it, he felt that Master was eating Coptis chinensis. Ling Mo said dryly. He hesitated for a long time and said awkwardly, "I think that Madam has been out for a long time. I'm afraid that she recalled a lot of the past, so she reverted to her old ways. She must have you in her heart. Master, I know." Ling Li put down the bowl and chopsticks and suddenly said. His eyes were full of calmness without the previous irritation. Then he smiled and said in a clear voice, "Ling Mo, I know what you said. It's ridiculous that no matter how she treats me, as long as she is with me, as long as I can look at her, it's enough. I am very patient. If 1 year is not enough to heal the pain in her heart, then 2 years. If 2 years is not enough, then a lifetime. I have broken through to the longevity realm, and my lifespan has been increased by 200 years. Li has reached the peak of the acquired realm at a young age. She will certainly break through in the future. Can afford to wait. Feeling the strong faith in Master's words, Ling Mo's worries disappeared. He nodded heavily and said in his heart, I hope I can live to see the day when Master and Madam are back together. In the backyard, Mammy Li thoughtfully prepared hot water for Su Li to wash away her fatigue. Su Li's clothes were all taken off, and the steam was rising. She leaned back against the bath wall. Her thick and curly eyelashes trembled slightly. Then she opened her eyes, showing a touch of fatigue. The trip to Tianji country seemed to be easy, but it took a lot of effort to talk with the ancient existence. What's more, since she met Tan Tai Fong for the first time, she contacted him many times. Every time she tested him, she fought with a strong man. After returning to Yunjing City, she really had a moment of relaxation. Clatter, with a light sound of water, a white and delicate jade arm appeared in the water. Su Li looked down and was stunned for a moment. Then she slowly stabbed her wrist with her fingertips, and then, nothing appeared. She tightened her lips, and there was a sense of hesitation in her eyes. But this hesitation only lasted for less than a breath, and then completely disappeared. What did the old beggar mean? Su Li gently breathed out a turbid breath, and her eyes became clear again. She thought for a moment. In fact, she returned to Yunjing City yesterday, but she stayed in the Linli building. After the matter of the Luo family was settled, Luo Yingying also followed Luo Yichen to join the Linli building. Luo Yichen's childhood friend, a young man named Fan Tianxing, also joined them. Su Li didn't pay too much attention to them. Her energy was not infinite. Now all her spirit was restrained by the reincarnation mirror and the life ring, and she had no time to care about other things. At her request, all the disciples in the Linli building showed their life rings last night. The number reached 90%, and the remaining 10% were the creatures in the illusion. Among the 90%, the distribution of the color of the life ring was also the same as that of the Nanjiang country. Most of them were light blue, and a few were dark blue. Chu Qingning, Yin Xuetong, Fang Mu, Luo Yichen, Mei Ruhan, and Fan Tianxing were all orange. Only Fang Yuan showed the same red as her in the past, but the color was very light, not as red as her blood. Su Li killed many people of the Luo family in Tianji country, and the people she brought back were all outsiders with life rings. If the space in the spiritual realm was not enough, she really didn't know where to lock these people up. After coming out of the spiritual realm, Su Li was very surprised to meet the old beggar who told her fortune many years ago. This time, the old beggar didn't pretend to be crazy, but just sighed, as if he felt sorry for her. If you capture and imprison outsiders so wantonly, the mirror spirit will notice it. Old man, I have already got the worst result. Even if the mirror spirit notices it, what can it do? At worst, I will die earlier. Little girl, what do you want to do? You appeared in front of me, and you should have guessed it. Chapter 309. The night was as cold as water. Under the silent night sky, the cold moonlight shone on the ground and reflected two long shadows. Useless. Su Li smiled sweetly and said, Old man, it has nothing to do with you whether what I do is useless or not. If you just want to say this, I'm sorry that I can't accompany you. The old beggar was slightly stunned. He seemed to be surprised that Su Li was still so rude to him after knowing some secrets. But he soon recovered and laughed. Little girl, you're right. I, an old beggar, can't control you. You can do whatever you want. Perhaps in the end, this old beggar will lend you a helping hand. Help me? Su Li raised her eyebrows and asked with a chuckle, Can you help me to deal with the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace? The old beggar's face immediately turned green. He was almost choked by Su Li. Then he turned around and slipped away. Little girl, remember, there are no absolutes in the world. If you can grasp the opportunity, you might be able to come back from the dead. Come back from the dead. Come back from the dead. Su Li held a handful of warm bath water with one hand and frowned slightly. She murmured a few words and couldn't understand it. Her current situation was just as the old beggar said. It was a complete dead end. If she wanted to get a chance of survival, She must master a trace of the natural law. But the natural law was unfathomable. How could she find a trace of the law and master it? It didn't sound possible at all. A slight sigh echoed in the silent bathroom. After Su Li came back, Ling Li could finally calm down to deal with the affairs of the cult that piled up in the past half-month. But when he looked through the intelligence sent by the Tianya house every day, he became more and more suspicious. The Nanjiang country, which had frequent changes, suddenly became quiet and sent compensation materials and tributes to the frontier barracks. It seemed that they wanted to stop the war. Qinglan, do you know what's going on? Ling Li handed the file to Ling Qinglan. Ling Qinglan rolled his eyes and didn't take it. He said, even if you care about Su Li, you should at least take a look at the frontier intelligence sent every day. The news is out of date. Look at the latest. Then, Ling Qinglan took out another file from the table. Ling Li took it and immediately opened it. He glanced at the contents. Suddenly, his face changed slightly and he was shocked. The monarch of Nanjiang country was changed. When did this happen? Ling Qinglan frowned and shook his head. He said, I don't know. The strength of the Lu family is weaker than that of the Wu family and the Ma family in Yunjing City. It is impossible for them to defeat the Wei family. Ling Li said yes. According to the change of events, the change of the lord of Nanjiang country should coincide with the time when he went to save his second brother. I suspect that it was the Joyful Union sect who did it. Ling Qinglan waved the folding fan in his hand and said solemnly, a few days ago, the brothers lurking in the Lianshi cult sent back the news that the lord of the Lianshi cult suddenly took a group of elites and went deep into the mystery forbidden land. So far, there has been no news. The rest of the people in the Lianshi cult either left or dispersed. He's no longer a threat. The mystery forbidden land, Ling Li thought for a while. He had heard of that dangerous place. Since the Lianshi cult went in, they couldn't come out in a short time. There was no need to worry about it. What he should pay attention to now was why the Lianshi cult ventured into the mystery forbidden land. It is impossible for the Hehuan sect to force the Lianshi cult to this extent. With the strength of the Hehuan sect, it is still not enough to bring down the Wei family. Ling Li rubbed his eyebrows with a headache. He didn't pay attention to the intelligence for more than 10 days. He didn't expect that the situation in the world had changed beyond recognition. Investigate. First, investigate what happened in Tiangu City half a month ago. Send someone to secretly test the details of the Lu family. At the same time, pay close attention to the movements of the Hehuan sect. If it is the old Lord Yi who did it, it will not stop here. Ling Qinglan was shocked and nodded heavily. There was no omission in Ling Li's decision. With his order, the huge and tight machine of the Yinma cult immediately ran. But the Hehuan sect seemed to disappear. No matter how Ling Li searched, he couldn't find any clues about the Hehuan sect. Ling Li had to give up helplessly. There was no war in the frontier, so he didn't need to be distracted by Ling Ping. He concentrated on dealing with the Dongfang family. With Su Li by his side, time passed unconsciously. In a blink of an eye, another year passed. Mammy Li counted with her fingers. The miss and the son-in-law had been married for more than a year and a half. It had been 4 years since she rescued Su Li from the wooden house outside the Desa town. Time really passed by quickly. Mammy Li sighed. Suddenly, she saw Chiu Meng leave the east courtyard with a worried face, followed by a doctor. Madam comes to urge again. It's no wonder. They have been married for so long, but there is no movement in the belly of the miss. If it were me, I would also be worried. Mammy Li muttered strangely and went back to the kitchen to prepare snacks. She had been with Su Li for the longest time. Although she didn't learn much about the skills of the miss, the snacks she made were much more delicate than those of other cooks. Madame Dowager and Madame Dowager liked them the most. This year, there was not much change in the Dahan country. Although the health of the emperor was getting worse year by year, since the fifth prince was appointed as the crown prince, the domestic situation was much more stable than in previous years. As for the Tianji country and the Nanjiang country, they were naturally calm. The relationship between the three countries entered an unprecedented period of harmony. The Yinma cult took this opportunity to expand its strength. Both the Xuelo cult and the Tianya house had made great progress. They even completely covered the Nanjiang country and stepped into the territory of the Tianji country. In the true spirit realm, which was not connected to the mortal world, the situation in the inner realm had changed dramatically over the past year. First of all, the Ghost Valley, the second force only inferior to the Shaoshan Palace in the spiritual circle, suddenly announced the closure of the valley. All the disciples who were walking in the outside world also returned to the valley, and there was no sign of going out. Rumors were everywhere in the spiritual circle. Some people said that the Ghost Valley was suddenly destroyed by a mysterious, vengeful person. Some people said that the founder of the Ghost Valley returned to the valley to teach immortals, so that all the disciples were recalled. All kinds of rumors were more exaggerated than the other, and no one believed them. Soon after, the enthronement ceremony of the head of the Wanjian sect overshadowed the Ghost Valley. The name of head Wen Tingshan spread throughout the spiritual circle by holding a banquet for 3 days and 3 nights. At the same time, the wife of the head, Ning Qing, was pregnant. It could be said to be double happiness. Su Li asked Feng Yuan to send the congratulatory card, and she had been staying in the Ling mansion to practice. Finally, at a certain moment, Su Li opened her eyes, stopped running the Xiangong, and stroked her slender wrist with her fingertips. Foundation, there are still 4,000. With a sigh of relief, Su Li got up, pushed the door open and went out. The sunshine outside was quite dazzling, which made her squint. The scenery in the courtyard in front of the wing room was as lush as a year ago. The 4 words, extreme prosperity and then decline, appeared in Su Li's mind. Then she seemed to sense something, and her footsteps suddenly stopped. Raising her head, she didn't know when there was a figure beside the quiet courtyard wall. Vicissitudes, loneliness, ragged clothes, disheveled hair and dirty face, like a lonely ghost. The familiar face full of wrinkles at this moment exuded a completely different gloomy pneuma. It was him, Qi Xianqing. Master! Su Li's pupils shrank slightly, and she called softly. Qi Xianqing immediately responded. His figure flashed to the front of Su Li. He stared at Su Li with his turbid old eyes and said nothing. At this moment, Mammy Li passed by the door and saw Su Li standing in the courtyard. She immediately smiled and said, "Hello, miss, you finally know to come out. Basking in the sun is good for your health." Su Li was slightly stunned. She glanced at Qi Xianqing, who was still staring at her, and then looked up at Mammy Li outside the courtyard door. From that angle, she should see Qi Xianqing's back. "Miss, what's wrong with you?" Mammy Li's voice interrupted her thinking. Su Li came to her sense and shook her head. "Nothing. I am thinking about something. You can go ahead." But Mammy Li didn't doubt her and disappeared outside the door. Su Li's sight returned to Qi Xianqing. After a long silence, she suddenly said, "Ghost clan?" Qi Xianqing's eyes fluctuated. It seemed that he had no feet. He floated to the side of Su Li. His voice was hoarse. He was totally different from the gentle and elegant old doctor in those days. "You know Ghost clan. Who told you?" "Tan Tai Feng." Su Li simply replied. She was more and more sure that her cheap master in front of her had already remembered his identity. Even if she lied with his ability, he could soon find it out. It turns out to be him." Qi Xianqing laughed wildly, and his eyes burst with unforgettable hatred. "He also had a part in destroying my ghost clan." Su Li was silent. Qi Xianqing was stunned. He suddenly showed a mocking expression on his face and kept laughing. "I forgot that you are also a human clan, hee hee." Su Li slightly pursed her lips and slightly lowered her chin. "Senior, why do you come here? What did you call me?" When Qi Xianqing heard Su Li's words, he was immediately angry and asked angrily. Su Li's expression didn't change. She said in a deep voice, Just what?" Qi Xianqing interrupted Su Li and said gloomily, "People of Ghost Clan pay attention to single-mindedness. Since I have recognized you as my disciple, you have to be my disciple for a lifetime. You can't regret it." Did Ghost Clan have such a custom? Su Li was speechless for a while and didn't know what to say. She had expected that if she solved the matter of Ghost Valley, Qi Xianqing would definitely come to her. But she didn't expect that it was Qi Xianqing who had recovered his memory. Lass, take this thing. Qi Xianqing turned his palm and took out a quaint black ring from nowhere. Su Li took it with doubt and looked at it a little. There was no pattern on the surface of the ring. The texture was a little rough, like a stone surface. Chapter 310. This is... Su Li was horrified. She reached out to take it off, but found that the ring seemed to grow out of her flesh. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't pull it off. Seeing this scene, Qi Xianqing suddenly smiled with a sense of relief on his face, as if he had completed a very important mission. My apprentice, stop. As long as you put this ring on, there is no reason to take it off. Really? Su Li looked up and her eyes were cold. She cut her ring finger like a knife without hesitation. Qi Xianqing didn't stop her and let Su Li do it. At the moment when the sharp finger wind broke the surface skin of the ring finger, Su Li's movements suddenly stagnated. She forcibly withdrew the force behind, and her expression was completely gloomy. In her eyes, the black lotus ring on the ring finger suddenly disappeared and then appeared on the other 4 fingers. After flashing several times, it was fixed on the little finger. This thing has been integrated into your body, and its position is not fixed. Even if you cut off 10 fingers, it is also useless, not to mention the ring finger. Qi Xianqing said proudly. Su Li was silent for a moment. Suddenly, she changed her previous anger and smiled. Master, don't you know the current situation of your apprentice? In the end, this ring will still return to your hands. Su Li said and stared at Qi Xianqing's reaction. But Qi Xianqing just pulled out an unknown smile, and then his figure disappeared with the wind, leaving a sentence echoing in her ears. There is an old ancestor in the Ghost Valley, and I have helped you to get rid of him. It doesn't matter how many people you kill for the rest. As for those human clan with life rings, I have sent them to the spiritual realm. I still have something to do. When the time is right, I will meet you again. Su Li's eyes flashed, and she looked up at the direction where Qi Xianqing disappeared. There was an old ancestor in the Ghost Valley? Then why didn't he have any reaction when she attacked the Ghost Valley? If the old ancestor was an ancient person, Qi Xianqing, why can you fight in the mirror without being hurt? Is it the talent of the Ghost Clan? Thinking of this, Su Li frowned. A ghost clan that could move freely. She raised her hand and looked at the ordinary black lotus ring on the little finger. After a moment of silence, she suddenly breathed a sigh of relief, and her eyes were burning. No matter how many variables there were, her plan would continue, and no one could stop it. At lunchtime, Su Li didn't see Ling Li come to eat. She went to the study but didn't see him. When she was wondering, Chu Lu in maid clothes came in. After seeing Su Li, Chu Lu quickly saluted, "Young madam." Although her real identity was Ling Qinglan's sister, for the sake of safety, she hid her identity as a maid in the Ling mansion. Naturally, she had to abide by the rules. Su Li nodded gently and asked, "Where did they go?" This servant doesn't know." Chu Shi hesitated and answered. She did accidentally hear the whereabouts of Ling Li and others, but Brother Qinglan told her not to tell Su Li. Su Li narrowed her eyes and sat in the position where Ling Li usually dealt with chores. She said, "Chu Lu, don't you think too highly of yourself to lie in front of me?" Chu Lu's identity was suddenly exposed. She stepped back in horror and panicked. You, who are you?" "It doesn't matter who I am." Su Li smiled faintly and said, "The important thing is the whereabouts of Ling Li and others. Tell me." "Ling Qinglan asked you to hide it because he was worried that I would act rashly. Now it's been so long. Why don't you tell me?" Chu Lu bit her lower lip and struggled in her heart. Finally, she was frightened by Su Li's exposure of her identity. She changed her mind. She knelt down and told everything she knew. "Master and others have been away for more than 2 hours. I heard that they are going to a newly opened brothel in Yunjing City called Sweet Alley. Young madam, please keep it a secret for me. I just want to stay with my brother and live a peaceful life. I don't want." Chu Lu said and suddenly felt something wrong. She looked up and saw that the chair behind the table was empty. There was no one there. Young madam left? When did she leave? Chu Lu was confused and immediately frightened. Wasn't Su Li always in the acquired 8th hurdle? Why didn't she, who was in the acquired 9th hurdle, find out how Su Li left? Is she not Su Li? Who is she? Chu Lu sat on the ground blankly and thought about it for a while. At this moment, in the sweet alley, in the spacious and bright lobby, the vermilion decoration made the ground more bright. In the center of the round carpet in the middle of the lobby, Ling Li stood silently and looked cold. Dozens of women in different clothes lay on the edge of the carpet. Looking at the position where they fell, they were all knocked out by Ling Li before they approached. A maze? Ling Li looked around and saw that the rooms on the second floor were symmetrical, as if they were carved from the same mold. There were strange patterns on both sides of the stairs. Some of them were very familiar. He immediately realized that he broke into a tactical matrix. No wonder Ling Qinglan, Ling Mo and others disappeared. Right at this moment, an extremely enchanting voice came from all directions. "Ha! You deserve to be a famous figure in the martial arts circle. I really admire your temperament and determination. But, should I call you Hierarch or Third Master Ling?" Before the voice died away, Ling Li suddenly became serious. Without saying anything, he turned around and stabbed to the second floor with his fingers. A wisp of wind turned into a sword and pierced through the door and window. There was a muffled hum in the room, and the charming voice stopped abruptly. Ling Li succeeded in one strike, and he didn't stop. He flew up and smashed the wooden door. As the sawdust flew, an obscure figure flashed away. Although it was a glimpse, he still saw the person's face clearly. It was the lord of the Hahuan sect, Yi Tian. Ling Li didn't hit the target for the second time. He walked back to the middle of the lobby and stared at the closed room upstairs. He laughed loudly and said, "Lord Yi, why do you hide? Is it because your appearance doesn't match your voice? You know that you can't be seen, so you hide?" Yi Tian, who was in the dark, was so gloomy. But after all, she had lived long enough, so she didn't make a sound. Ling Li, the third child of the Ling mansion, was only 18 or 19 years old. His cultivation was even higher than hers. She had been pursuing the longevity realm for a lifetime, but Ling Li reached it in less than 20 years. How could she bear it? No wonder that at such a young age he could not only control the Yinma cult, but also subdue the Tianji country and destroy many forces. This time, it was her Hahuan sect's turn. The madness in Yi Tian's eyes became more intense. The charming voice returned to normal. It was even harsher than the owl. Even Ling Qinglan and others, who were some distance away, felt a tingling in their eardrums when they heard it. "Ling Li, don't be complacent. If you want to destroy my Hahuan sect, your Yinma cult is not qualified. I'd like to see how you will behave in front of it." "Ha!" When Ling Mo and Ling Qinglan heard the voice, their faces changed at the same time. They shouted, "Break the tactical matrix. Attack that direction with all your strength. Break the tactical matrix." All the followers of the Yinma cult heard the order and immediately began to break the tactical matrix in the direction of Ling Li. But the progress was too slow. It would take at least 1 hour to break the tactical matrix. I didn't expect that the Hahuan sect has such a high level in tactical matrix besides poison. I should have taken a tactical matrix elder with me. Ling Qinglan's face was slightly pale. Ling Mo shook his head and waved the sword in his hand to stab the same place in the tactical matrix. He said, "When we came, we had killed 80% of the disciples of the Hahuan sect. But the Lord has not reached the longevity realm. I believe in the Master. Maybe when we go out, the Master has finished." Ling Qinglan also joined the team to break the tactical matrix. He sighed, "I hope so." When Ling Mo and others tried their best to break the tactical matrix, the scenery around Ling Li changed greatly. The original magnificent lobby disappeared and was replaced by a barren underground plain. There was a dark pit under his feet. A long ladder extended down and almost swallowed people. Ling Li frowned. Just now, Yi Tian rushed into the pit at the risk of being hit by him. Could it be that what she said just now was not alarmist talk, and there was really a horrible existence in it? "We're already here." Could it be that we're going to give up halfway and return home? Thinking of this, Ling Li smiled and stepped into the pit. His figure was slowly swallowed by the darkness and disappeared. Drip, drip, the sound of falling water echoed in the quiet cave. Ling Li walked no less than 1,000 steps. At this moment, the stone ladder under his feet was no longer dry. It was stained with a sticky substance. There was an unpleasant smell in the air. Ordinary people might vomit as long as they smelled it. I have never smelled such a smell. Ling Li covered his nose and mouth. He kept moving forward nervously. After a long time, there was a light green light in the depths of the dark cave. Exit. Ling Li was refreshed. He sped up slightly. When he reached the edge of the cave, he suddenly stopped. There was a person in the open space in front of him. To be exact, it was a mummy. He approached cautiously and suddenly realized something. He looked at the mummy and then his pupils shrank. Yi Tian, the lord of the Hahuan sect, who had just entered the cave alive, died. His blood was sucked dry and he didn't hear any movement. In the silence, the silent horror was spreading. Ling Li suddenly felt numb. The situation was completely beyond his imagination. He thought that Yi Tian mentioned was the old ancestor of the Hahuan sect. Now Yi Tian was dead. It was very likely that, hiss, which little guy is outside? Don't you come in and chat with me? A charming voice, like sweet honey, suddenly came from Ling Li's mind. It shocked him and made him dizzy. He walked uncontrollably to the cave. At the critical moment, Ling Li bit the tip of his tongue. The strong pain mixed with the smell of blood broke out in his mouth. Under such stimulation, he regained control of his body. Chapter 311. Giggle. What a handsome child. I'm tempted. The seductive voice seemed to be able to bewitch people. Ling Li looked tense and forcibly suppressed his heart, which was aroused by the tone. He stared at the graceful figure that suddenly appeared in front of him. Under the pale green light, a familiar but strange face came into view. You are, Ling Li thought of the owner of this face and looked slightly serious, Su Zipei? The face of the woman in front of him was exactly the same as that of Su Zipei, who had been reduced to a slave. Was it a coincidence or... Su Zipei, I have some impression of you. The woman tilted her head in confusion and touched her cheek with her nails. Then Ling Li saw that her nails were more than an inch long and glowed with unusual metallic luster. Could these nails belong to human beings? Ling Li felt cold. Su Zipei suddenly laughed out. I remember. The Su Zipei you are talking about, isn't it the blood food that I ate a few days ago? A human girl of 17 or 18 years old is really delicious. Eating human beings? Su Zipei was dead? Ling Li's pupils shrank and he subconsciously stepped back a few steps. Suddenly, there was nothing under his feet. When he was about to step back to the stone path, Su Zipei suddenly rushed to him at a very fast speed like a ghost with a twisted smile on her face. Her hands were about to touch Ling Li's chest. Go away. Ling Li's eyes were sharp and he slapped Su Zipei in the air. Su Zipei took the slap and continued to rush to him as if nothing had happened. Helplessly, Ling Li simply rushed back and fell into the pit like a meteor. Crack, crack, crack. At the bottom of the pit, the white bones piled up like a mountain. Ling Li's figure sank into the bone mountain like a meteor and crushed a large number of bones. For a time, the sound was continuous. After a while, Ling Li, whose clothes were a little damaged, appeared from the bones. He gasped slightly and ran the Qigong method to float on the surface of the fragile bone mountain. He glanced at the sea of white bones in the vast cave, and a hint of horror flashed in his eyes. There were so many bones. There were no less than 100,000. Were these people bloody food of the mysterious woman just now? What exactly was it? Ling Li didn't have time to think too much. Suddenly, there was a slight sound of breaking the air behind him. He hurriedly turned back and raised his sword to block. Ding! The sound of gold and iron was almost ear-piercing. A terrifying force hit the sword. Almost instantly, the inherited sword of the Yinma cult in Ling Li's hand was broken into several pieces. His body flew backward like a cannonball and hit the hard mountain wall with a bang. He spat out a mouthful of blood. What kind of power was this? What fresh blood food? Su Zipei rushed to the blood-stained mountain wall like a madman and stuck out his tongue to lick it. When Ling Li saw this scene, he felt disgusted and almost vomited blood. He barely stood up. He didn't care that this movement would aggravate his injury. He stared at the hole in the mountain wall and burst out the fastest speed. His figure flew out like a shadow. He had to escape. He wasn't a match for this monster. Stubbornly resisting would only result in his death. He was fast, but Su Zipei was faster. She appeared in front of Ling Li in a flash and slapped Ling Li into the ground again with a sneer. Boom! The ground exploded and a human-shaped hole appeared. This time, it took Ling Li 15 minutes to climb out of the sea of bones. He breathed heavily and was stained with blood. His eyes were full of unwillingness. Could it be that he was really going to die here for no reason? Child, how can you leave me? Ling Li felt a weight on his shoulder, and the seductive voice suddenly sounded in his ear. He sensed that Su Zipei breathed out and immediately got goosebumps on his neck. The soft body of Su Zipei climbed to Ling Li's chest. This time, Ling Li was seriously injured and had no strength to avoid it. Looking at Su Zipei at such a close distance, Ling Li saw that her pupils were vertical, which reminded him of a terrible creature instantly. Su Zipei looked at Ling Li with her bright green eyes. Her eyes were full of excitement and fascination. Her long nails scratched Ling Li's face, and then she gently leaned on his chest. Listening to the powerful heartbeat, she sighed with satisfaction. It's really a perfect blood food. You are not only beautiful, but also so pure and delicious. I really don't want to eat you, Su Zipei said and suddenly exerted force. Ling Li groaned and a piece of flesh was dug out. Su Zipei ate it and licked the blood on her nails. Su Zipei didn't forget to eat it. Disgusting. Get away. Ling Li's forehead was full of cold sweat because of the pain. He was powerless to push away the increasingly heavy body of Su Zipei. You are not a human being. Is there really a monster in the world? The bright smile on the face of Su Zipei suddenly froze. She became furious and scratched 5 bloody marks on Ling Li's chest. Monster? How could I be a monster? I am a god. I am the most ancient snake god in the world. If I didn't believe in your human clan, how could I be trapped in this remote place? I can't even find a decent blood food. How could I rely on devouring the lowly human clan to maintain my life? Unforgivable. Boom. The boundless and horrible momentum burst out. Ling Li and the bones under him were instantly thrown far away. The strong force hit Ling Li's seriously injured body. He suddenly blacked out and lost consciousness. At the same time, Su Li, who had just arrived at the sweet alley, changed her expression. She punched the ground without hesitation and went underground. After a long time, the movement in the underground cave finally subsided. Su Zipei stood in the center of the extremely clean circular open space with disheveled hair. Suddenly, she came to herself and said, "Blood food. Where's my blood food?" She immediately rushed into the bones, and countless bones were blasted into powder. Within a few breaths, she found Ling Li, who had fainted. Sensing the vitality in Ling Li's body, Su Zipei breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Fortunately, he is still alive. Otherwise, he will not be fresh." Then she tore Ling Li's clothes very quickly. Soon, Ling Li was naked. You have such a good figure. I can only enjoy it once. I am really reluctant." The green pupils of Su Zipei gradually turned pink. At the same time, she slightly opened her mouth and spat out a pink air mass. As soon as the air mass touched Ling Li's skin, it immediately penetrated into his body like a living thing. Then just for a moment, a restless pneuma slowly emerged from Ling Li's body. Seeing this scene, Su Zi smiled charmingly and said, "Let me serve you well." Just when her red lips were about to touch Ling Li's face, a monstrous killing intent like a mountain torrent suddenly broke out behind her. Su Zipei's expression suddenly changed. Before she could respond, A white palm had been printed on her back, and then, boom! A blast 10 times more terrible than before broke out. Su Zipei was like an ant blown away by a seal. In the blink of an eye, she was hit dozens of feet away and crashed into the hard mountain rock, leaving a human-shaped hole. In the fierce wind, Su Li's eyes were full of killing intent. She floated over and held Ling Li, who was in a coma, with one hand to block the remaining impact for him. Then she pointed at Ling Li's major acupoints with her fingertips to seal his pneuma and blood to protect his life. Suddenly, Su Li's eyes were fixed. She saw a bloody hole in Ling Li's chest. The extinguished anger in her heart immediately boiled. She flashed and appeared in front of Su Zipei. Su Zipei just struggled out of the mountain rock. She only felt a black shadow flashed in front of her. Then she felt a sharp pain on her right face. She was thrown far away and fell heavily into the sea of bones. After a long time, she climbed up and screamed angrily, "Which family are you from? How dare you ruin my plan? Could it be that you've forgotten the ancient agreement?" Before she finished her words, Su Li was expressionless. She flashed and slapped Su Zipei. Su Zipei spat blood and her sharp teeth fell out. "What ancient agreement? You dare to attack Ling Li? You are courting death." While speaking, Su Li's eyes flashed with killing intent. Her 5 fingers were like claws and penetrated the chest of Su Zipei, bringing out a large number of internal organs and snake scales. Su Zipei spat out a lot of blood and held Su Li's arm in horror. "I remember. You are Su Li, the sister of this bloody food. You are not an ancient person. No wonder, go to hell." Su Li's eyes were extremely cold. She exerted force in her hand and most of the internal organs of Su Zipei were suddenly smashed. "Wait, if you kill me, Ling Li will also die." Perceiving Su Li's killing intent, Su Zipei finally panicked and screamed. As soon as the words came out, she suddenly felt that the movement of her chest was stagnant and there was no trend to continue. She gasped for a few breaths and looked frightened. "Horrible! Lunatic! How can there be such an existence like you in the reincarnation mirror? You are not an ancient practitioner, but your cultivation is higher than that of ancient practitioners." Su Li frowned. "You talk too much nonsense. Detoxify the poison in Ling Li's body." She just noticed that Ling Li's state was a little abnormal. Besides, she had never heard of that kind of poison and couldn't detoxify it. Otherwise, she would not stop only because of Su Zipei's words. Seeing that Su Li cared about Ling Li, Su Zipei was a little calm. She carefully pulled Su Li's hand from her chest, revealing a penetrating bloody hole. She took a big breath and her flesh and blood immediately squirmed. In the blink of an eye, the bloody hole shrank and no more blood flowed out. After finishing this step, Su Zipei breathed a sigh of relief and laughed. "I know. The memory of the bloody food tells me that you are his wife. No wonder he is so angry. But it is strange. Why does the child have such a beautiful wife like you? Why is he still a virgin?" Su Li frowned. "Do you want to die?" Su Zipei stepped back a few steps and waved her hand. "No, no, no. Miss Li, you are too angry. I just said a few words. Besides, the method of detoxification has something to do with me." Chapter 312. The Bone Sea Cave, which was like a gust of wind, fell into silence at this moment. Su Li withdrew her fingertips from the glabella of Su Zipei. The latter immediately fell to the ground and foamed at the mouth. Soon there was no sound. Then, with a bang, the body of the giant dark green snake appeared. A member of the demon race who had lived for who knew how many years had died just like that. Su Li frowned and felt that the foundation in her wrist was reduced by 1,000. This battle seemed easy, but in fact she had burst out the greatest combat power, so that she could seriously injure the snake demon. Returning to Ling Li, who was still naked, Su Li knelt and sat on the side. Her expression was a little uncertain. What she used just now was the secret method from her memory, the soul-searching skill. As the name suggested, this skill could explore other people's primordial spirit and memory. It was also applicable to the demon. However, after using it, the person who was affected by it would either die or become stupid. Su Zipei was obviously unlucky and died directly. Su Li, who got her memory, knew her name at this moment. It was Bai Zhen. She also vaguely understood the cause of her death. It was probably because the demon's soul had been seriously injured a long time ago. It was incomplete, so it was a little crazy and abnormal. As for other memories, most of them were chaotic. She hadn't fully recovered her memory, so she couldn't see the reason for a while. What really annoyed her now was the red mist that Bai Zhen spat to Ling Li just now. Snakes were extremely lascivious. If Bai Zhen's memory was correct, the red mist was a strong poison used by the demon snake clan to seduce men. It couldn't be removed by ordinary means. The only way was, thinking of this, Su Li struggled. She was about to die. If she really did it with Ling Li, what would Ling Li do after she left? At this moment, she still didn't think about herself, but Ling Li's feelings. Perhaps for Su Li, death was coming. What was the use of keeping a pure body? Maybe I can. All kinds of complicated thoughts emerged in Su Li's mind. Then, at a certain moment, when the handsome boy lying in front of her groaned like a beast, the girl, who was pale all year round, finally blushed. She gently untied the belt around her waist and bent down. Roar! At the edge of the dark green snake mountain in the sea of white bones, two figures were entangled with each other. All sorts of indescribable sounds echoed. After a long time, the darkness passed and Ling Li opened his eyes blankly. Suddenly, he sat up and touched his body. He found that his clothes were still intact and the wound on his chest had been carefully bandaged. Is it a dream? Ling Li breathed a sigh of relief and immediately blushed. How could he have such a dream with Su Li? Was it because he was too hungry? After thinking for a moment, Ling Li's sight gradually returned. At a glance, he saw the dark green corpse as huge as a mountain. He was shocked and stood up. Then he remembered the situation before he passed out. Not a dream. Ling Li's heart tightened, and he couldn't help but feel his whole body carefully. As expected, he felt a trace of feeling in his lower body. He and this snake. Thinking of the weight of his body in a coma and the constant twisting touch, Ling Li's face immediately became ugly as if he had eaten a fly. Hierarch Ling, what are you thinking? There was a sudden voice behind him. The voice was so close that it sounded in his ears. Ling Li suddenly came to himself. He saw a young man in cyan clothes with an inexplicable smile on his face. Mr. Li? Ling Li whispered in surprise. How could this person appear and... He looked back at the snake monster that had been dead for a long time. There was a glimmer of hope in his heart. He asked a little eagerly, "Thank you, Mr. Li. You saved me again. If I may be so bold, may I ask if Did you have sex with the snake monster?" The young man in cyan clothes took over the topic, but said with a faint smile, "Hierarch Ling should know best whether I did or not." Hearing this tacit acquiescence, Ling Li was completely silent. He was really confused and didn't know what to do. So, how could he go back to Sealy? You should be lucky. If I didn't sense the abnormality and come in time, you would have become one of these bones. Let's go up first. Your subordinates should be waiting for a long time. Ling Li was stunned and nodded to follow the young man. He was absent-minded all the way, so he didn't find that the young man in cyan clothes in front of him walked unnaturally. When they arrived at the entrance of the stone path, Su Li had completely suppressed the trace of unnaturalness. Ling Qinglan and others saw them come out. They were surprised that Mr. Li was also here. Then they saw the blood on Ling Li's body. They were shocked and surrounded him immediately. Hierarch. Master. Ling Li, how are you? Ling Qinglan spoke last. When he saw Su Li in the iconic cyan clothes, he immediately cupped his hands respectfully and said, "Mr. Li, why are you here?" Su Li smiled slightly and didn't answer. Ling Li came to his mind and waved his hand to answer for Su Li. "I was careless this time. I didn't expect that there was such a horrible thing hidden here. If Mr. Li didn't save me in time, I am afraid." Ling Qinglan was suddenly horrified. Even Ling Li said it was horrible. How powerful was the thing below? It's over. It's useless to say more. Su Li said softly and turned to look at Ling Li. She said quietly, I think that after this experience, Hierarch Ling should understand some taboos. I have a suggestion, but I don't know whether I should say it or not. Mr. Li, please say it. Ling Li cupped his hands slightly. The owner of the Lin Li building had saved him several times and completely eliminated his hostility. Of course, the premise was that he didn't covet Su Li. If possible, the fewer people know about the thing below the ground, the better. You know, there is more than one taboo in the world, and the number may be beyond the imagination of Hierarch. If they know that the snake is dead, they will definitely associate it with something. At that time, there will be a lot of trouble. When Su Li said this, Ling Li was suddenly shocked. He had really felt the strength of the snake demon. Even if he sacrificed the lives of the people of the Inma cult, he couldn't compete with it. If there was another one, it would be a disaster. Who could guarantee that Mr. Li could come in time next time? Although he didn't know why Mr. Li could save him every time, he couldn't entrust his life to a stranger who had nothing to do with him. I will keep in mind what Mr. Li said. Su Li nodded and said, let me give you another advice. The Inma cult is not constrained now. I am afraid that they will attack the Dongfang family soon. However, if Hierarch Ling can, please listen to me and attack them later. Ling Li was shocked. How could this person know everything? Even in the Inma cult, only a few people knew that he would attack the Dongfang family. He even hid it from the people of the Elder Mountain. Su Li noticed that Ling Li's expression was different. She couldn't help but smile. It is not difficult to guess what Hierarch Ling is thinking. That's all I have to say. It depends on Hierarch Ling's opinion whether to accept it or not. I have something to do, so I will leave now. Then Ling Qinglan and others were about to make a fist and palm salute to say goodbye. Su Li turned around and left without stopping. Ling Mo and others were confused. Why did Mr. Li leave in a hurry? Was it urgent? Ling Li didn't care about Su Li's strange departure. At this moment, he was in a mess and had no time to be distracted. After standing for a moment, he gently breathed out and sighed, let's go back to the Inma cult first. Don't go back directly? Ling Qinglan wondered, you have been out for a long time. Su Li. As soon as he heard Su Li's name, Ling Li was slightly shocked. He immediately looked at his blood-stained body with a little disgust. I have to take a good bath first. Ling Qinglan nodded. Although it was strange that she had to go back to the headquarters for something that could be solved on the road, he didn't think much. At present, everyone had fought hard. It was good to go to the headquarters to have a rest. Su Li swept to the spiritual realm. Finally, she couldn't stand it and spat blood on the stone pillar of the broken temple. Such a movement suddenly made the boundary ripple. Then Chu Xiao came through the boundary with a shocked face. He supported Su Li and said in a panic, highly great master, what's wrong with you? Who hurt you like this? Su Li shook her head and suppressed the sharp pain in her heart. She gritted her teeth and said, let's go in first. Chu Xiao didn't dare to delay. He quickly took Su Li into the spiritual realm and took her all the way to the top attic. Don't let anyone disturb me. After Chu Xiao left, the room was quiet again. Su Li had time to concentrate on running the Ghost Valley meditation direction to suppress the boiling thing in her body. This thing was nothing else but the blood elixir that flew out from Lin Yanxing's eyebrows and entered her body. For more than a year, this thing had never moved, which almost made Su Li forget its existence. But when she lost her chastity to Ling Li, this thing suddenly began to crazily impact in her body. It seemed that this body was no longer a qualified habitat. If it was in normal days, she would let it go. But she clearly felt that this thing had absorbed all the remaining foundation in her body. If it left her body, she would definitely die. So, she could only struggle to not let it break the surface of her body. Time became longer and longer in the suffering. She didn't know how long it had been. Her consciousness was blurred under the severe pain. Finally, there was a familiar voice in her ear. Master, what's wrong with you? Don't scare me. It was Jing Xian's voice. It seemed that she was crying. This girl should have the inheritance left by Blood Lord in her body. No wonder, the old beggar's voice sounded one after another, followed by a ghostly voice. Things have come to this. Although the tactical matrix has not been fully prepared, we can only bite the bullet and do it. The day has finally come. Apprentice, although the tactical matrix of reincarnation I prepared for you is not perfect, the blood elixir in your body can also help you. Now is the best time. Whether you can win a chance of survival depends on yourself. Chapter 3:13. In the muddle-headedness, time lost its meaning. At the beginning, Su-Li could only concentrate on resisting the severe pain, and then gradually became numb. Finally, she had spare energy to touch the thought passed by Qi Xianqing. As soon as she touched it, Qi Xianqing's hoarse voice sounded in her heart. The tactical matrix of reincarnation is a secret of our ghost clan. Although it is the most precious treasure of our clan, it can be applied to anyone. Its only function is to turn the dead to life. The price is high, so we can't use this method at ordinary times. This time, you capture people from the outside world. Although I don't know your intention, I gradually have an idea. If so many life rings are broken together, the vitality gathered is enough to start the matrix. The process of changing fate must be painful, and ordinary people can't bear it. But if you persist, not only your life will be safe, but also your talent and luck will be greatly improved. And with this matrix, you will not be controlled by the reincarnation mirror. At that time, you can break through the boundary and control your own fate. Rebirth from the dead and change fate. Su-Li's soul set off a violent fluctuation. Qi Xianqing and the old beggar, who maintained the tactical matrix outside, immediately felt it. They immediately looked up, but Su-Li still closed her eyes, and there was no sign of waking up. Old ghost, don't be too anxious. It has only been a month, and this girl's soul consciousness has responded. It shows that her will is firm and tenacious, which is still above our expectation. Qi Xianqing showed a gratified smile, but in the eyes of the old beggar, it was a weird smile, which made the old beggar couldn't help but murmur that he deserved to be an old ghost who had lived for many years. Are the little kids who follow Su-Li still outside? Qi Xianqing suddenly said, and the old beggar nodded slightly. Yes, the group of people under Su-Li are loyal, which is quite rare. Qi Xianqing immediately sneered and said, that's because they are lucky. I hate betrayal most in my life. If someone dares to leave Su-Li, I will personally kill him. The old beggar opened his mouth in surprise, and finally didn't know what to say. He could only shake his head and sigh, Madman! You are a complete madman. I don't know whether it is right or wrong to cooperate with you. Qi Xianqing smiled grimly. I just want a future for Ghost Clan, and you just want to escape. We both take what we need. What's wrong? Even so, the old beggar looked worriedly at Su-Li, who was still suffering in the tactical matrix. No one had ever taken this road. Could Su-Li really succeed? At the same time, outside the tactical matrix of the spiritual realm, Feng Yuan and other senior executives of the Linli building gathered here. Everyone looked gloomy, especially Feng Yuan, who was the leader. His face was so gloomy that even Luo Yichen, who stood beside him, felt a pressure. Not long ago, Feng Yuan broke through. Even Feng Yuan himself was surprised by the breakthrough this time. But everything went smoothly. He became the first practitioner of the longevity realm in the core of the Linli building before Luo Yichen without any hindrance. But when Feng Yuan was about to tell Su-Li joyfully, he learned that Su-Li's condition changed again. She was healing in the spiritual realm. When he hurried here, he knew that Su-Li was not facing a small crisis at all, but a big crisis concerning life and death. Moreover, he couldn't help her. When he learned that this matter might be related to Lingli, he flew to the Ling mansion with a murderous look. Chu Qingning wanted to stop him but was seriously injured by him. Other people were not much better. It was a mess. Finally, Jing Xian calmed him down. Later, all the people of the Linli building arrived. They sat on the ground outside the gate of the tactical matrix of the spiritual realm and waited for Su-Li to come out. Or another result. In front of the gate, Jing Xian stood in silence with a worried look. Since Su-Li entered the tactical matrix, she had been standing here and never left. As for the spirit outside, there was an ancient existence involved in this matter, so she didn't need to be distracted. At this moment, Chu Xiao cautiously walked to her and whispered in her ear, "Great Master." After the disappearance of the first Great Master, the Yinma cult made frequent movements. It seems that there is a tendency to break out. Jing Exin narrowed her eyes slightly and pondered. Her expression and reaction were very similar to Su Li's. I didn't expect that Ling Li loved the master so deeply. Just a month or so, he couldn't help it. Speaking of this, Jing Xian's voice lowered. Chu Xiao stood aside and didn't dare to disturb her. After a while, Jing Exin slightly raised her head and whispered, "This is a critical time. The less the turmoil, the less likely the master will be affected. You send someone to warn him, but don't tell him the truth in case Ling Li loses his mind and makes a big trouble." Speaking of this, Jing Xian's eyes became cold. At the same time, let Yu Wuhai go to the Shaoshan Palace and warn him. I believe that as long as he is not stupid, he will not fight against the Linli building, which is guarded by two ancient existences. The Dongfang family is just a chess piece. It's okay to abandon it. I'll do it right away. In the Ling mansion, Hierarch Ling, listen to me. If you continue to make trouble, it will not do any good to Miss Su. Miss Su is now in a critical period and needs absolute stability. If you insist at this time, I'm afraid that Miss Su will fall into eternal damnation. That's all I have to say. Hierarchling, take care of yourself. After Chu Xiao said the last sentence, his figure disappeared, leaving only silence in the study. Master, Ling Mo's voice broke the silence. Ling Li took a deep breath, as if he was suppressing something. He said coldly, "Go and ask Zhang Laoshan's men to do it. I want all the information about the identity of the man." Seeing Ling Li give up the previous idea, Ling Mo breathed a sigh of relief and turned away. After Ling Mo left, there was only Ling Li in the study. He looked at the soft chair under the bookshelf where Su Li often sat and was lost in thought. Why did Su Li suddenly disappear? Was it because she knew what he did underground, so she left angrily? At first, he thought so. But when he found that the restaurant of the Linli building was closed for half a month, he finally realized that something was wrong. Why did the Linli building also disappear when Su Li disappeared? Did Mr. Li take action? When he thought of Mr. Li's desperate strength, he was out of balance and immediately sent more people to inquire about any news about the Linli building. At that time, Su Li disappeared, and the Linli building was a little chaotic. Ling Li even found some clues. It turned out that it was not the Hehuan sect that destroyed the Nanjiang country, but the Linli building. Not only that, even the two major forces of the Tianji country and the Ghost Valley and the Wanjian sect in the spiritual circle also fell into the hands of the Linli building. The masters controlled by Mr. Li were far more powerful than any other forces in the world. Even the Shaoshan Palace could not compare with them. Why did he want so many forces? Ling Li continued to investigate, and even arrested several high-level people in the Linli building, but he got nothing. Ling Li almost went crazy when he didn't get the news of Su Li for a long time, so he made a very crazy decision. He would attack the Dahan country controlled by the Dongfang family in advance. Only in this way could he broaden the clues and find Su Li. In this regard, although Ling Qinglan and others tried their best, it was useless. The Yinma cult immediately entered the stage of war preparation, but before the plan was tried, Chu Xiao came to them automatically. For the safety of Su Li, the plan had to be temporarily suspended. But Ling Li would not trust others easily. As long as he found some news about Chu Xiao, he would immediately go to find out the truth. It would be best if he could find Su Li, but if not, Ling Li's eyes flashed crazily. Suddenly, a voice came from outside the door, and it was extremely urgent. "Li, is there any news about Li?" It was Chiu Meng who came in. At this moment, her face was pale, and there were still tears in her eyes. Obviously, she had worried a lot about Su Li in the past 2 days. Ling Li tightened his lips and thought of Chu Xiao, but he didn't say anything and just shook his head. It would only make people more disappointed if he said something that had not been confirmed. "What should we do?" Chiu Meng was so anxious that she frowned and said, "How could such a big living person disappear? Is she tired of living here and sneaked away somewhere?" "Impossible." Ling Li pinched the wheelchair with his fingers and said firmly, Li has been well behaved these years and has never been out of the Ling mansion. If she wants to leave, how can there be no sign? She must be delayed by something. Chiu Meng was shocked by Ling Li's momentum. She secretly thought that her youngest son was just a loafer. How could his momentum be stronger than that of his second brother? But she didn't think much and quickly comforted him. Yes, it must be so. I will urge Qinglan to send more people and all the guards in our mansion. Ling Li responded and closed his eyes painfully. He even sent most of the people in the Yinma cult. What was the use of the few people in the Ling mansion? Now he could only hope that what Chu Xiao said was true. When the time came, Su Qi would come back by herself. Strength, I need strength. If my strength is equal to Mr. Li's, I can go anywhere in the world. I don't need to worry that I can't find Su Li. Ling Li roared crazily in his heart, but more than that, he felt a sense of powerlessness. Waiting and suffering were equally long. This year was extremely torturous for Ling Li, Dongfang Ri, Qi Xianqing and the people of the Linli building. The tactical matrix was not finished. In the middle of operation, the blood of the life ring in the tactical matrix gathered to the center and completely wrapped Su Li, forming a blood cocoon. No one could see the situation inside, including the two old guys. But for the common people and cultivators, this year was an extremely lucky year, because no matter which realm the forces were in, they were all incomparably well behaved. It was as if there was a force that was deterring them, preventing them from acting recklessly. This phenomenon became more and more obvious after the spiritual realm sent people to eliminate a troublesome force. In a blink of an eye, 10 months passed. Chapter 3:14. Rumble, the blood-colored tactical matrix that covered hundreds of feet shook. As time went by, the magnitude of the vibration became greater and greater. Cracks appeared and extended to the feet of Qi Xianqing and the old beggar. What's the matter? The old beggar's pneuma was much worse than 10 months ago. He looked at Qi Xianqing, who was also weak, with surprise and doubt, but he saw that the latter frowned. It was the first time to drive the tactical matrix of reincarnation in such a way. How could he know the changes? Boom, boom, boom. The movement of the tactical matrix was getting greater and greater. A large number of tactical matrix patterns were broken during the vibration, and the pneuma also had the tendency to spread out. Qi Xianqing and the old beggar had no choice but to suppress it. But no matter how the tactical matrix shook, the blood cocoon in the center of the tactical matrix was still motionless. Failed. The old beggar's face was slightly pale. The matrix patterns were broken, which meant that the tactical matrix stopped running, and the blood cocoon was still motionless. There was only one result. That was, the person in the tactical matrix was dead. Qi Xianqing, you said 60 or 70%. What about me? This tactical matrix has cost us 10,000 years of life. How can we just let it go? Qi Xianqing's face was gloomy and he didn't speak. His gray eyes stared at the blood cocoon. He didn't believe that Su Li, who had always been determined, could not bear the pain and died. Well, it's fate. The old beggar saw that the blood cocoon in the middle of the tactical matrix also began to peel off and be damaged. He couldn't help but sigh and withdrew his means. This place is about to collapse, and the movement will not be small. In order to prevent the mirror spirit from noticing, we should leave early. Qi Xianqing seemed not to hear it and still stared at the blood cocoon. The free and easy old beggar, who always laughed at the world of mortals and didn't care about anything, finally became angry. Suddenly, there was a tearing sound like cloth. Although the sound was very small, it could not escape the ears of the two old guys. Qi Xianqing's eyes instantly brightened. Then he saw a pale hand stretched out from the crack of the blood cocoon, and then tore it hard. Ha! Success! The smile on Qi Xianqing's face couldn't stop expanding, and the old beggar was also surprised. He stared at the figure slowly struggling out of the blood cocoon, for fear of missing any details. But after Su Li completely got out of the blood cocoon, Qi Xianqing saw a mass of blood in her arms, and the smile on his face immediately froze. What was that? When Su Li saw the two dispirited old people, There was a slight fluctuation in her eyes, but it soon calmed down. 10 months was enough for her to understand many things. This included why the two ancient existences in front of him seemed to have suffered heavy injuries, and their auras were weak. The tens of thousands of life rings alone only occupied 70% of the resources of the heavenly isolation formation, and the other 30% came from these two people. From their expressions, it could be seen how much they had paid to operate the formation. Unfortunately, I failed. Su Li suddenly opened her mouth. Her voice was hard and harsh, as if her throat had been seriously hurt. It was not as pleasant as usual. Failed? The old beggar's expression changed slightly. He moved closer and said, "You can come out alive. How could you?" Before he finished his words, he finally saw what Su Li was holding in her arms. To be exact, it was a bloody swaddle. In the swaddling clothes, a baby that looked like it was carved from jade was sleeping peacefully. It was as if this embrace, which was filled with the smell of blood, was the most peaceful place in the world. "A newborn child?" the old beggar exclaimed. "How could you have a child?" Although he was in the dark, Su Li's activities in these years had always been in his eyes. Su Li had never consummated with Ling Li. How could she be pregnant? Before the old beggar's question was answered, Qi Xianqing, whose eyes were faintly red, finally said angrily, "You gave all the opportunities to him. Do you know what it means?" "Do you know?" "I know." Su Li looked calm. She reached out and gently stroked the delicate cheek of the child in her arms. A trace of tenderness flashed in her eyes. "I failed, but you didn't fail. Raise him well, and you can still get out of here." "Su Li!" A loud shout seemed to exhaust Qi Xianqing's remaining strength. He was full of sorrow, but looking at Su Li's peaceful face, he didn't know what to say. Although they were not of the same clan, although he used Su Li in this plan, everything he did might be selfish, but Su Li was definitely the one who benefited the most in the end. But now, in the illusion, even if you give birth, you'll only get the soul from the outside world. He's not your son at all. You're giving this opportunity to others just like that? Don't tell me that I'm old and muddled, and you're muddled too. Master! Su Li looked at Qi Xianqing, who almost wanted to strangle the baby in her arms. She called him sincerely for the first time, which made him shocked. His eyes filled with anger restored calmness. "Good. I will give you a chance. If you can't convince me, I will kill the child in your arms." Sensing the unquestionable emotion in Qi Xianqing's words, Su Li smiled slightly. She glanced at the old beggar who was listening and called softly, "Jing Exit." As the voice fell, a rainbow light came, and Jing Exin was surprised. "Master, you succeeded." Su Li shook her head. "Go to eliminate the movement of the tactical matrix and prepare a quiet room." Jing Exin was slightly stunned. Seeing the swaddle in Su Li's arms, although she had many doubts, she did as she was told. A moment later, in the quiet room, "Master, there is one thing you are wrong about." Su Li gently put down the swaddle in her arms. The baby immediately stretched out his hands uncomfortably, as if he wanted to grasp something. "One thing I can be sure of is that he is my son. He is a newborn soul, not from the outside world." Hearing Su Li's words, Qi Xianqing suddenly frowned, but he didn't get angry. He pointed at the baby's naguan. After a long time, there was no abnormal phenomenon. No life ring. The old beggar was suddenly shocked and stood up. "Is it a creature in the illusion? But it is not right. Girl, you are from the outside world. According to the law of reincarnation mirror, your offspring in this world will inevitably choose a soul from any life ring in the outside world to integrate with it. How can a new soul appear?" Su Li glanced at Qi Xianqing, who was thoughtful, and shook her head. "Senior, did you forget my identity?" The old beggar was stunned, and then his eyes suddenly shook. He pointed at Su Li and said unbelievably, "You changed the law of reincarnation mirror and succeeded. Doesn't that mean?" Su Li shook her head and said, "Senior, you think too highly of me. At best, I am just a lonely ghost with a little authority. How can I change the law of reincarnation mirror? This time, I just broke through the shackles with the help of the big tactical matrix. If there is no big tactical matrix, I can't do it even if I try my best. I see. The old beggar was enlightened, and his eyes focused on the sleeping baby. His pair of turbid eyes gradually shone. Can this child really take us out of reincarnation mirror? Su Li smiled slightly. If the prediction of the seniors is right, it is reasonable. Let's not talk about this first. Qi Xianqing suddenly opened his mouth, and his face was faintly irritable. He stared at Su Li's pale face and said in a deep voice, "Disciple, tell me the truth. How much time is left?" The old beggar reacted quickly when he heard the words, and his eyes moved from the baby to Su Li, who had been smiling and acting as if nothing had happened. "If you didn't say it, I would have ignored it. You are haunted by the blood elixir in your body, and now you give all the opportunities of tactical matrix of reincarnation to your son. How can you survive?" There was a silence in response to him. The atmosphere in the addendum immediately became heavy. Qi Xianqing patted the table impatiently. Finally, in the astonished eyes of the old beggar, he asked repeatedly, "Why? Is it so disgusting to be my apprentice that you don't even hesitate to die? Or do you not want to live at all? Now you have a son, which is just what you want." Su Li was still silent. She stretched out her fingers and gently teased the baby who was less than a month old in swaddling clothes. The pain in the blood cocoon, as the life ring invaded little by little, was like the torture of thousands of snakes. Even now thinking about it, she shuddered. The boundless suffering made her go back to the most miserable years in her previous life. At that time, there was a movement in her lower abdomen. The little bit of pure vitality condensed. Yes, it was the son she had lost in her previous life. "You finally forgave me and finally came back to find me." The joy of regaining what she had lost almost suppressed everything in an instant, and even the increasing pain was nothing. According to the secret method of controlling the reincarnation mirror in her memory, she forcibly broke the rules and took in a new soul from the outside world. Then she stayed in the blood cocoon, watching the life in her lower abdomen grow slowly, and waited for the day when he would come with her full of expectation. However, she had forgotten that her situation was not one that a small, ordinary life could survive in. But 5 months old, the breath of life in her lower abdomen no longer increased, but because of the harsh environment of tactical matrix of reincarnation, it began to disappear slowly. No, it can't dissipate. At that moment, Su Li felt as if her heart was cut by a knife. The scene of losing her son in her previous life reappeared, adding another scar. She couldn't bear to lose her child again. "Since ordinary life can't survive, then I will let you become a rare dragon or phoenix." Without thinking for too long, Su Li made a crazy decision. Then, all the opportunities, including the life ring, tactical matrix of reincarnation, and bloody elixir, were transmitted to the unformed life in her lower abdomen through her body. But how could Qi Xianqing, an ancient existence with indifferent bloodline, empathize with the pain of loss? So, after a long silence, Su Li finally said lightly, "My life is in my own hands." Qi Xianqing opened his mouth and said nothing for a while. Chapter 315. Qi Xianqing and the old beggar left, but they didn't take Su Li's son away. It was probably because the movement was too big this time, and they couldn't guarantee that they would not be noticed by the mirror spirit. If the mirror spirit noticed Su Li's son in advance, it was not a good thing for them. Su Li took her son out of practice and didn't contact with others. She only asked Fang Yuan to come over and talk with him for a night. In everyone's ardent expectation, only Fang Yuan came out of the addendum. No, there was also the crying baby in his arms. Yin Xuedong was stunned and looked at the baby in surprise. She couldn't help asking, "Where is Su Li?" Although they didn't talk to Su Li, they all saw Su Li and Fang Yuan talking in the addendum. Why was he the only one who came out at night? Fang Yuan pursed his lips tightly. At this moment, compared with his usual indifference, he had a lot of unwillingness and sadness that couldn't be explained. However, no matter how much his heart was bleeding and how much he wanted to destroy the world, he didn't show it on his face. Facing Yin Xuetong's question, he shook his head blankly and said, "She has left. It's urgent." But before she left, she told me the next arrangement of the Linli building. "Time is pressing. Let's go back first." Yin Xuetong and others didn't doubt him and immediately went back. At the same time, they were relieved. It seemed that Su Li's crisis had passed, and the Linli building didn't need to worry about being leaderless. "Fang Yuan? Who is this child?" Chu Qingning couldn't help but ask. It was too strange that there was a child inexplicably. Fang Yuan looked down at the baby who was tired of crying. His eyes were full of love and hatred. He hated so much that he was crazy. This child was Ling Li's son. But he also loved him, because the blood flowing in his body was Su Li's. "Eldest brother?" Fang Mu reminded. Fang Yuan suddenly came to his sense. After a moment of silence, he said, "I will raise this child personally. He won't cause any trouble. You don't need to worry about him." Then he left first regardless of everyone's reaction. "Tut!" Chu Qingning shook his head and said, "Falling flowers are longing for love, but the heartless stream is heartless. Fang Yuan, you are really depraved, don't say that." Yin Xuetong complained. Seeing that Fang Yuan's figure had disappeared in the spiritual boundary, she could not help but sigh. It was not difficult to guess who the child's parents were. But if it was true, Fang Yuan's life was too bitter. In the northern snow country of the true spirit world, it was currently winter. The wasteland outside the city was covered in snow, and the world was quiet. The two soldiers guarding the city rubbed their hands and cursed, "This damn weather is freezing people to death. If I didn't have a Hotian 8th stage cultivation now, I would have been frozen to death." As soon as he said this, the other soldier whose lips were purple from the cold smiled bitterly and said, "You're at the 8th layer, and I'm only at the 7th layer. Every day, I'm covered in injuries from the cold. Even my monthly stipend is used to treat my injuries. I really can't live like this. Just bear with it. The weather will be warmer in a few months." The soldier rubbed his hands hard again. Suddenly, he thought of something and his eyes brightened. "I heard that there is a peerless tactical matrix running in the area of Shaoshan Palace, a big sect in the northern snow country. It can change the sky and the earth. It's spring all year round. It's really a place of immortals. If I can go there once in my life, I will die for it." The soldier with purple lips smiled and was about to say something. Suddenly, his eyes straightened and he pointed to a black spot in the vast snow outside the city. He exclaimed, "What's that?" The other person was also startled. He used his eyesight to look, and as the black dot gradually approached, he saw the silhouette clearly. He immediately said in bewilderment, "It looks like a person?" "What seems to be?" "It's a person." The two were shocked and immediately went around the city wall to open the gate. At the same time, they were also puzzled. How could someone come to the snow country in this weather? But there was no doubt that the person who could withstand the extremely cold wind and snow was definitely a senior that they couldn't afford to offend. Not long after the two of them opened the city gate, a black-clothed young girl walked through the snowstorm. Her skin was pale and translucent like crystal, perfectly blending in with the snow. Her cold and indifferent expression directly pierced into the hearts of the two, causing them to shiver uncontrollably. "Oh my God, where does this iceberg beauty come from? Why is it colder than the snow?" The soldier murmured to himself and watched the girl in black leave. He felt relieved and was about to close the door, but he saw the girl stop and look at him. At this moment, the soldier's hair stood on end, as if he was stared at by an ancient beast. He couldn't move and was frightened. "I ask you, where is Shaoshan Palace?" "Shaoshan Palace." The soldier shivered and subconsciously pointed in the direction he heard. The girl's figure disappeared instantly, as if she had never appeared. "Did we meet a ghost?" The two soldiers looked at each other and only felt that their mouths were dry. What they saw today became the most peculiar experience in their ordinary lives. The girl in black was Su Li. She walked alone in the wind and snow in silence. After a few days, she stopped and looked at the holy mountain of Shaoshan Palace through the layers of illusory tactical matrix. 900 points of foundation left. Su Li whispered to herself after closing her eyes to sense it. After the blood elixir was transmitted into her son's body, it was completely quiet. She spent several months to get back more than 1,000 points of foundation. She hurried with all her strength and spent more than 100 points. The foundation is more durable than before. Su Li calculated and found this. Maybe it was the effect of the tactical matrix of absolute sky. But at this point, she had no time to care about these details. Old ancestor of Shaoshan Palace. Su Li squinted her eyes and walked straight to the Shaoshan Palace. Although Jing Exen said that the old ancestor of Shaoshan Palace had temporarily given up contact with the Dongfang family and hid in the palace, but who could guarantee that after she left, the old ancestor of Shaoshan Palace would not come back and attack the Yinma cult? Both the old beggar and the master were weak. If the news was known by Shaoshan Palace, even if the Yinma cult and the Linli building were tied together, they couldn't compare to Shaoshan Palace. Thinking of this, Su Li's killing intent soared. Shaoshan Palace must die. Otherwise, she couldn't leave peacefully. Or you, how dare you break into my Shaoshan Palace? Tell me your purpose or I won't forgive you. As soon as she passed through the illusion matrix, many elders in the Shaoshan Palace were immediately shocked. In the blink of an eye, several rainbows flew to her. Su Li glanced at them. 10 people at the peak of the inborn realm and 3 in the longevity realm. It deserved to be the first force in the spiritual circle. However, if all these people die, the old ancestor of Shaoshan Palace should come out. Su Li's face was cold. At the moment when many elders stopped, she pulled out the sword in her hand. Boom! An earth-shattering aura instantly enveloped the 13 people, causing this group of elders, who usually lived like princes, to turn pale with fright. No, she is a senior in the late stage of longevity realm. Retreat. Go to ask the Grand Elder. Only the senior in the supernatural realm can capture the demon girl at one stroke. The elders who had just stopped saw that the situation was not good and ran away quickly. But Su Li had the intention to kill them, so she wouldn't let them go. She increased her strength from 10% to 20%, and her body movements suddenly increased. She flashed in front of the elder who escaped the fastest, and indifferently raised the sword to cut down. You have no chance. Go to hell. Boom. A burning light like the sun burst out from the tip of the sword and quickly enlarged in front of the elder. No! The elder only let out a scream, and was completely drowned by the sword light. Su Li didn't stop and continued to kill the remaining elders. After the tactical matrix of Ju Tian, her realm had far exceeded the level of the longevity realm. She couldn't estimate her specific strength. However, no matter whether they reached the supernatural realm or not, these elders who were only in the first and second realms of longevity realm had no strength to escape in front of her. Which Excellency Gu Zhou came to visit my palace. Please be merciful. In the middle of killing, a terrible pneuma finally rose in the forbidden area of the Shaoshan Palace. Su Li stopped and stood in the nothingness, looking at it calmly. Since the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace had come out, she didn't need to waste her foundation anymore. However, in less than a breath, the space in front of Su Li was distorted for a moment, and then an old man in a green robe stepped out. After seeing Su Li, his triangular eyes immediately glowed, and a subtle look flashed from his eyes. At the same time, he didn't forget to say, "Why are these unpresentable juniors so angry?" After a moment, the old man in a green robe seemed to see something, and his eyes suddenly fixed. "Your Excellency, who are you? I know almost all the practitioners of the Guizhou province like the back of my hand. Why have I never seen you and your bone age?" A faint smile appeared on Su Li's face, and she was extremely cold. "You ask me who I am? I'm the one who will kill you." Boom! A wave that was 100 times stronger than before broke out without warning. In an instant, the surrounding palaces and pavilions were shaken into powder, and countless disciples of the Shaoshan Palace died. The old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace's face changed greatly. This momentum was no less than the supernatural realm. Damn it! You dare to attack me! Aren't you afraid of being suppressed to death by the reincarnation mirror? Under the premise of the agreement, the ancient existence didn't expect that Su Li would attack him. Almost all of Su Li's attacks hit him. But even so, after the vast wave passed, although the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace was covered with blood and some injuries, his limbs were still intact. He flashed back and wanted to keep a distance from Su Li. Su Li frowned slightly. She attacked with all her strength, but the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace was only slightly injured. The existence of the ancient level was really not so easy to kill. Sensing that there was still more than half of the foundation, Su Li's eyes showed determination. Originally, she wanted to go back to have a look after finishing this thing, but now, burn! With a deafening shout between heaven and earth, the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace was horrified to see that Su Li's body was ignited with a layer of white flame. He suddenly thought of something and immediately shouted in horror, "Burn the foundation. You are an outsider. You're actually..." Chapter 316. In the Shaoshan Palace, countless palaces collapsed, and the earth veins were broken, shaking thousands of miles. Even the small city of the snow country at the foot of the divine mountain could feel the shaking. Countless ordinary mortals and low-level warriors escaped from their houses and stood on the street, looking at the source of the earthquake with uncertainty. That direction is the Shaoshan Palace. Did something happen to the Shaoshan Palace? Impossible. The Shaoshan Palace is a powerful force. It is known as the first in the spiritual circle. How could it be attacked to its base camp? Whether it is or not, we will know after a while. The news will come out eventually. At this moment, above the divine mountain, the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace fled crazily, but there were still countless scars on his body. In the blink of an eye, he was seriously injured. Su Li burned her foundation, and her combat power increased several times. At the beginning, the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace could resist with the trump card in his hand. But as time went by, the protective treasure in his hand exceeded the bearing limit. After it burst, the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace immediately smelled the breath of death. Regardless of the loss of the treasure, the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace suppressed his anger and persuaded her, "Fellow practitioner, what is the irreconcilable hatred between us? Why do you have to die with me regardless of your life? Tell me. Let's bury the hatchet. Why do we have to hurt each other?" Su Li heard the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace, and then a more violent attack burst from the sword. "Maybe not before. But after today, if I let you go, you will never let me go." She didn't know the details of the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace, but she knew his temperament from Tantai Fengfeng. He was narrow-minded, vengeful, and extremely protective. After Ling Li killed the Dongfang family, as long as the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace knew that there was no threat to him, he would not mind to destroy any weak existence related to him. Seeing that Su Li did not stop, but attacked more fiercely, the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace, who had always wanted to calm down, was completely desperate. Then the anger and viciousness in his heart broke out like a flood. "Ignorant junior, you are just like an ant. If you really want to die, I will help you." In the end, the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace's anger turned into an inhuman roar. The next moment, his skinny body immediately swelled like a balloon. His clothes burst in the blink of an eye, and he turned into a behemoth that was taller than the central hall of the Shaoshan Palace. Voila! Pieces of white scales appeared on the surface of the skin. Su Li looked dignified. She flew hundreds of meters away and finally saw the monster clearly. The old ancestor of the Shaoshan sect was a shifty-eyed pangolin monster. Heavens, what kind of monster is this? It even collapsed the central hall. Monster. Our old ancestor is actually a demon. No wonder there are human experts attacking us. I actually cultivated in a demon's lair for 100 years. How terrifying. As soon as the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace showed his real body, the people of the Shaoshan Palace immediately became distracted. Many loyal disciples were at a loss and forgot to dodge. They were crushed into blood by the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace. After transforming into the original body, old ancestor of the Shaoshan realm, could no longer maintain the calmness of the human tribe. His big eyes were bloodthirsty. He waved his forearms furiously. Many elders and disciples who had just escaped to the edge of the mountain-protecting tactical matrix were smashed into a cloud of blood mist before they could resist. All traitors must die. The old ancestor of the Shaoshan palace roared and started to kill. Although his body was huge, his speed did not decrease, but became faster. In the blink of an eye, there were only a few living creatures left on the holy mountain of the Shaoshan palace. Very few escaped. Su Li stood in the air behind the crazy pangolin. Her face was paler than before. Her wrists were faintly transparent, and light could be penetrated from them. The destruction of the Shaoshan palace could be said to be caused by her, but she did not feel guilty at all. Time was approaching. In order to fulfill her wish, she had already become a devil without bottom line and principles as in the previous life. Less than 300 foundation. Su Li murmured. The feeling of dying had never been so clear. Maybe as long as she waved her sword 3 times with all her strength, she would die completely. However, after the old ancestor of the Shaoshan palace returned to the original body, his defense power was greatly increased. 3 swords couldn't even break his scales. If the old ancestor of the Shaoshan palace hadn't become less intelligent and hadn't noticed her, she might have been seriously injured now. The strength of the ancient existence. Su Li frowned and clenched the hilt of the sword. She still took it for granted. Her memory told her that her foundation in the Jiuzhou region was no more than 1,000 years. Even if she could gather all the foundation in an instant, she might not be the opponent of the old ancestor of the Shaoshan palace, not to mention the less than 1,000 foundation. In this way, she might not be able to eliminate the threat for him. Su Li's face showed a touch of regret. Then suddenly she was stunned and looked up. There was a sense of familiarity from the soul. At the same time, the old ancestor of the Shaoshan palace, who was still raging on the holy mountain, let out a roar in a panic. Then he clawed the ground crazily. In the blink of an eye, half of his body was submerged in the ground. He wants to escape. Su Li's eyes suddenly brightened. She did not hesitate to raise the sword in her hand. She rushed out and slashed at the ground. This slash evaporated 200 foundation, but the result was obvious. An unprecedented shock passed into the ground, and a big hole appeared in the ground, which just made the head of the old ancestor of the Shaoshan palace reappear. A roar of fear far greater than anger came from his mouth. Then, before he continued to sink into the ground, everything suddenly became quiet. To be precise, everything was still, except Su Li, who was still gasping. Su Li looked down at her almost invisible hands, and then looked up at the clouds in the sky. There, a face appeared. It was not a human face or the face of any creature in the world. At least in Su Li's memory, there was no such creature. But she felt that this face was extraordinarily harmonious, as if it was the most perfect combination between heaven and earth. The inferior demon imprisoned the Shaoshan palace, showed its original body and disturbed the reincarnation mirror realm. You should die. Su Li's pupils shrank suddenly. As the cold mechanical voice resounded in her ears, the Shaoshan palace, who was still desperately fleeing, directly dissipated. Like a fragile sand sculpture, it drifted away with the wind after being air-dried. Except for a little ash, there was no trace left. Witnessing this scene, even Su Li, who was fearless, couldn't help but feel a throb in her heart. What kind of means was this? The power of words. Even in the Jiuzhou region, there was absolutely no such a terrifying existence that she had heard. What on earth was the reincarnation mirror? Su Li was silent and calmed down. She would never know the answer. It's you? Suddenly, a slightly surprised voice sounded in her ears, which was a little more lively than the mechanical voice just now. Then, before Su Li could respond, a transmission wave suddenly swept over, and the face in the sky disappeared without a trace. After a while, some warriors finally dared to come to the Shaoshan palace to find out what happened. When they saw the doomsday scene of blood and broken walls on the holy mountain, they were so scared that they couldn't even speak. Since then, the news of the destruction of the Shaoshan Palace spread throughout the real spiritual circle at a very fast speed, as if it had wings. Everyone was guessing what kind of existence could destroy the number one power in the real spiritual circle in one day. Thinking of the horror behind it, the whole spiritual circle fell into panic. In the reopened Linli building, Fang Yuan stared at the intelligence file from the Wanjian sect on the table. He was silent for a long time. When the baby cried in the inner room, he got up and walked into the inner room. After coaxing the child to sleep again, Fang Yuan looked at the dark night outside the window and was silent for a moment. Suddenly, he closed the window and then nailed it. He turned over his palm, and a small wooden memorial tablet appeared in his hand. Then he put it in the gap of the nailed windowsill and covered it with curtains. No one could see the clue. After doing all this, Fang Yuan returned to the bed and sat down cross-legged. Su Li, if there is a next life, can I wait for you? There was a low murmur in the room, with unspeakable sadness and softness. No one could imagine that he, who had always been decisive and cold, would have such a voice. At this moment, in a golden palace with no end, Su Li stood in the middle of the hall and looked at the existence in front of her, whose claws were thousands of times higher than her. Was this the mirror spirit of reincarnation mirror? Su Li took a deep breath. Facing this existence, she felt small as facing the sea. The pangolin demon, which was hundreds of meters high, was only the size of a claw in front of it. There was such a huge monster in the world. If it was in the outside world, even the space of one region could not accommodate it. When Su Li was amazed by the mirror spirit, the ancient existence also opened its eyes and looked at Su Li. After a while, a voice like a big bell reverberated from the huge palace. I remember that you are the human who woke me up hundreds of years ago. Su Li was slightly stunned. In her memory, she was the holy girl in that sect. It was indeed her who touched reincarnation mirror and made a vision appear. I see. There is a breath of the master in your soul. Maybe you are the descendant left by the master. But this breath is too weak, and you are about to dissipate, so it is useless. The master of reincarnation mirror? Su Li had doubts in her heart, but she didn't ask. There were only dozens of points of foundation left in her body, and the speed of dissipation was accelerating. In a few minutes, she would die, so it was useless to ask so much. Originally, I was still optimistic about you, and even let you control a part of reincarnation mirror to do things for me after you passed the 9 reincarnations, but now, the voice of the mirror spirit suddenly became indifferent. For a nominal cultivation companion, you chose to die. So, I misjudged you. Since you chose to die, don't be too reluctant to leave the world. Let's go. Chapter 317. The Breath of a Chess Piece. After Su Li disappeared, the indifferent look of the mirror spirit gradually showed a touch of coldness. Is it a conspiracy against me that she touched me? It was one of the most ancient existences in the world and could sense the past and the future. Since Su Li entered the reincarnation mirror, it fell into a deep sleep again. This time it woke up on the one hand because of Shaoshan, and on the other hand, it sensed the threat from Su Li. What kind of existence could pose a threat to it? Certainly, it couldn't be Su Li herself. The answer must be that someone behind Su Li was manipulating her to deal with her. Therefore, after it sensed carefully and couldn't trace the source, it made a prompt decision to end Su Li's life. In this way, the crisis in the dark dissipated in advance. With the disappearance of Su Li, the mirror spirit sensed for a while and confirmed that the hidden crisis had receded. Then it slowly closed its eyes and fell asleep. Because of the war in ancient times, its injury was too serious. If there were no other healing treasures, it could only rely on a long sleep to recover. The sun rose and the moon set. In a twinkling of an eye, another half a year passed in the world of the illusion of reincarnation. In this half a year, the situation in the secular world had been completely different. In the imperial palace of Dahan country, it was cold and silent, like the peace after the storm. The bright sunshine shone through the wooden door of the hall, bringing a trace of warmth to the cool hall. Ling Li, who stood in front of the golden throne, looked as cold as winter. His face was like a deep cold pool, with no end in sight. Dongfang Wuxue shrank his neck and withdrew his gaze. There was a trace of fear on his face, although he just sent his father to hell by himself. Not for anything else, it turned out that his mother had already been killed by this traitor. No wonder that he could no longer receive any news about his mother in the past 2 years. It was not that his mother didn't love him, but the only person who cared about him in the world had disappeared. Thinking of this, a touch of coldness appeared on his immature face. He looked at the civil and military officials kneeling below the hall with hatred. His mother's death must have something to do with these people. Among the officials, the most shocked one was Mrs. Gu. She stared blankly at her grandson, who stood tall and straight in front of the golden throne, like a dragon among men. Was this really her third grandson? When she received the news last night, she thought it would be a game with Dongfang Xiao as usual. But she didn't expect that when she entered the hall, she saw all the officials kneeling on the ground and shouting at Dongfang Xiao, who was horrified. "Your Majesty, please abdicate your throne. Your Majesty, please abdicate your throne. Your Majesty, please abdicate your throne." The third grandson, who had always been ignorant and foppish, stood in front of Dongfang Xiao like a magic sword. He looked down and was full of killing intent. "Dongfang Xiao, you are the emperor of a country. But you are jealous of the talented and perverse. You assassinated 3 generations of my Ling family. My grandfather, father, and brother all died in your hands. With such a big heart, how could you be the ruler of a country?" Dongfang Wuxue. Yes. Dongfang Wuxue, who had always been harmless in front of many princes, was like a cub at this moment, showing his sharp claws and teeth. "Although you are my father, you killed my mother. You deserve to die." After saying that, he raised the sword in his hand and fiercely chopped at Dongfang Xiao, whose cultivation had been sealed. A big head rolled from the chair to Mada, who was trembling all over. Dongfang Wushue's face was still full of disbelief. He would never expect that he was killed by his own son. At the same time, he was deeply confused. Why didn't the big backer of the Dongfang family send any message when they were in crisis? In the palace, many officials held their breaths for fear of disturbing the voice that was facing away from them. Until Mrs. Gu couldn't help but step forward excitedly and murmured, "Ugh." Ling Li's body shook slightly. He came to his sense from the daze and restrained his emotions. He turned around and walked down the golden high platform. In the more frightened atmosphere of the officials, he helped Mrs. Gu to sit down slowly. He forced a smile on his face. "Grandma, in addition to Dongfang Xiao, other people of the Dongfang family who participated in the attack have been killed. After I deal with the chores, I will go back with you and offer Dongfang Xiao's head to my grandfather." "Great!" Mrs. Gu was so excited that she couldn't control herself. She blushed and said, "My good grandson, I didn't expect that you have been hiding for so many years. We were all kept in the dark by you." Ling Li only bowed his head and said, "I'm sorry to make you scared. Please forgive me, Grandma." "Forgive me? What did I do?" Mrs. Gu stared at Ling Li with her old eyes. The more she looked at him, the prouder she became. She raised her head and said in a sonorous voice, "If you didn't endure humiliation, how could you destroy the old enemy of the Ling family? If we really knew your details in advance, it was not difficult to disguise for a while. But after a long time, the old fox Dongfang Xiao would definitely see the clues." Speaking of this, Mrs. Gu glanced at the head under Mada's feet. She looked very happy. When she looked back to Ling Li's face, her pride and relief finally turned into heartache. "The disguise for more than 10 years is not a joke. I hate you for not living up to expectations these years. You suffered at home, but you could bear it and develop your power secretly. How hard was it? It's me who should say sorry." Looking at the old man crying in front of him, Ling Li was silent, and a sense of relaxation rose in his heart, as if the pain and tiredness of the past 10 years were nothing, but at the same time he was more relieved. The resentment was finally over. Next, he could go to find Su Li. "Brother Li, it's great. I didn't expect that you are so promising." Kneeling behind Prime Minister Tang suddenly stood up and walked to Ling Li. He danced and said, I didn't expect that you are so powerful. I don't like Dongfang Xiao for a long time. Prime Minister Tang was a little frightened and wanted to stand up to pull back the sugar. But he saw Ling Li smiled and patted Tang Lei's shoulder. You are also good. I am much worse than you. Tang Lei laughed. Prime Minister Tang was relieved and shook his head and sighed. Could it be that this was fortune favors fools? After cooperating with the Inma cult, he naturally saw the true face of Child Li. But in order not to frighten his grandson, he didn't reveal it to Tang Lei. After a while, an imperial edict was taken out. The successor of the emperor was Dongfang Wuxue. The Dahan country was still the Dahan country and didn't suffer the fate of changing its name. But everyone knew that the country was no longer the surname of Dongfang. After a while, in the Ling mansion, Ling Ping and Xiaomeng, who didn't go to the imperial court, stared at the young man who walked slowly with the help of Mrs. Gu. For a moment, they didn't know whether they were in reality or in a dream. Li, your leg. At this moment, Xiaomeng couldn't see anything except the tall and straight young man who was much taller than her. For the first time, she looked up at her son. She couldn't control the crystal tears anymore. She threw herself into Ling Li's arms. Mom, Ling Li sighed softly and didn't say anything. Everything was in silence. Good boy. Ling Ping seemed to know his third brother for the first time. With a flash of inspiration in his mind, Ling Li, who stood up, immediately associated with the image in his mind. He laughed and said, I've always found it strange. The person who appeared many times and secretly saved me from danger, although his figure was very similar, was completely different from the one I saw before. So it was you. Ling Li smiled slightly and said in a low voice, Dongfang Xiao took away my father and eldest brother in that way. After I mastered some power, although I can't confront with him, I won't let him get what he wanted again. When Ling Ping heard it, his heart suddenly sank. Then he thought of something and his expression changed greatly. Grandma went to the imperial court today. Before he finished his words, Mrs. Gu suddenly threw a package into his arms and said, Ping, look at this. Then, as Ling Li said, Dongfang Zhao's head was used as a sacrifice to the deceased relatives of the Ling family. Everything went smoothly, but Xiaomeng always felt that Ling Li was not happy. Instead, his thoughts became more and more complicated. Is it because of her? A beautiful face of a woman appeared in Xiaomeng's mind. She couldn't help but be lost in thought. More than a year had passed unconsciously, but Li still didn't forget her. Since Li had been pretending to be a playboy before, how could he choose a man by his appearance? Was he really in love with Su Li? Where did she go? Thinking of this, Xiaomeng sighed deeply. Lord Rui was also crazy to find her, but there was no news in the past 1.5 years. It seemed that she had disappeared from the world. Mom. When she was thinking, Ling Li's voice suddenly came. She looked up and saw Ling Li standing at the door calmly with a little impatience. Did he come in and... As usual, Ling Li walked into the room and closed the door. This made Xiaomeng slightly absent-minded. She vaguely remembered that the last time Ling Li did this was also for Su Li. He just wanted to ask how to please a girl. This time, there was no exception. Mother, keep this talisman. Ling Li didn't say much and gave a black diamond-shaped token to Xiaomeng. In her puzzled eyes, he said, This is a protective token. It can resist any form of attack below the longevity realm. At the same time, it is also a token for giving orders. With it, you can also mobilize part of the power of the Inma cult. Inma cult. Xiaomeng's pupils shrank suddenly. Even a woman like her who had never really stepped into the cultivation world, she still felt frightened when she heard the 3 words of the Inma cult. The supreme cult lurking in the Dahan country. You can even mobilize the power of the Inma cult? Speaking of this, Xiaomeng suddenly thought of something and trembled. Hierarch of the Inma cult is called Child Li. Is it? Chapter 318. Hearing Ling Mo's words, Xiaomeng was stunned. If it was in the past, she would never believe this kind of words. She would even reprimand Ling Li for boasting and causing trouble. But when she remembered that he came back with the head of Dongfang Shao, destroyed the powerful Dongfang family, and secretly protected the Ling family for several years, she had to believe such extraordinary means. Ling Li, her son, was the hierarch of the Yinma cult, the supreme cult. Looking at the sparkling light in his mother's eyes, Ling Li knew that she had believed it. After a moment of silence, he continued, "Mother, Ling Qinglan will deal with the affairs of the royal family of the Dehan dynasty. Are you going to find Su Li?" Qiu Meng suddenly interrupted him, and her expression became soft. Hearing Qiu Meng's words, Ling Li was slightly stunned. Qiu Meng shook her head and sighed, "You were born in my womb for 10 months. Even if you try to restrain yourself in the past year, I can still see that you can't forget her." Ling Li was slightly shocked. Then he took a deep breath and bowed to Qiu Meng. "I don't believe that Li will leave me for no reason. If I don't figure it out, even if I die, I won't die in peace. I will have to trouble you and second brother to continue working hard for this family." Before Ling Li finished his words, Qiu Meng had already blocked his mouth in a panic and blamed, "You are such an unlucky child. I'm still young. Besides, the biggest obstacle has been eliminated by you. You are the biggest project of the family. It's nothing for me to solve some trifles for you. Go to find her with peace of mind." Speaking of this, Qiu Meng smiled softly, "I am still waiting for my grandson." "Thank you, mother." Ling Li looked more relaxed. "I will come back to see you within 3 years. Please don't worry about me. I will set off now." Then he bowed deeply again, and then turned out of the door without hesitation. He rode the spirit horse that had been prepared and went away. He didn't want to wait for a moment. Qiu Meng, who followed him all the way to the gate, watched her son go away. The tenderness on her face immediately turned into bitterness. She turned back to the room and sat in silence for a moment. Then she sat in front of the dressing table and opened the top drawer of the small cabinet. She took out rolls of portraits one after another. "These are the best girls in the capital city. Except for their different looks, they are not as good as Su Li. Ling Li, why do you have to be so stubborn?" Qiu Meng sighed with tears in her eyes. She was selfish after all. After Su Li disappeared for 3 months, she found no trace of her. Then, she secretly chose a new wife for Ling Li. However, on the one hand, Ling Li's reputation was so bad that no girls wanted to marry him. On the other hand, she saw the persistence in her son's eyes, so she didn't dare to show it. Ling Li had always been a man of his word. If she really forced him to marry again, it would almost have the opposite effect. When she was hesitating, Ling Li's hidden identity came to the surface, which shocked the world. He became the object of love for countless girls. But she had seen Ling Li's determination today. These portraits. Thinking of this, she threw all the portraits into the brazier. Suddenly, there was a big fire in the brazier, which made the light and shadow on Qiu Meng's face flicker. Ling Li got rid of the burden of the Ling family. He went out of the mansion and rushed for 7 days and 7 nights without eating or drinking. Finally, he arrived at the Qinghe province. He had monitored the mansions of the Su family and the Dongfang Rui family for more than a year, but he got nothing. The Linli building in Yunjing City had been closed half a year ago. Now, the only clue he could find was the Linli building in the Qinghe province. 1.5 years ago, after Mr. Li appeared to save him, Su Li disappeared almost at the same time. Moreover, the Linli building in Yunjing City also closed a few days later. It couldn't be a coincidence that the time was so tight. When dealing with the Dongfang family, he went to the Linli building to see Mr. Li more than once. But he was refused by the reason that Mr. Li traveled around. He even didn't see any protector of the Linli building. So, he was more suspicious and had the idea of exploring the Linli building in the Qinghe province. Good osmanthus wine. Come in and have a taste. The Liehua liquor is the real product of the northern country. It's a pity not to drink it. Ling Li, who had disguised himself, just entered the Linli building. His ears were filled with shouts. He glanced around and found that nearly 80% of the people in the lobby on the first floor were seated. Most of them were people in the martial arts circle. In the Qinghe province, the Linli building had replaced the Tianyake attic and became the favorite gathering place of people in the martial arts circle. Linli found a table and sat down. After a while, the waiter came to him. After ordering a pot of osmanthus wine, he looked around casually. He saw many ordinary drinkers and warriors drinking together. It was quite strange and harmonious. However, when he saw the wooden sign hanging not far from the entrance of the lobby, which said, "Those who disturb will be killed without mercy," he suddenly understood. With the ability of the Linli building, the Inma cult couldn't be the king of the secular world, not to mention frightening the rascals. As for Mr. Li, although he had been in contact with him for several years, he still couldn't figure out what he was thinking and what was the meaning of everything he did. "Sir, here is your osmanthus wine. Please enjoy it slowly." The waiter brought a clear and transparent golden pot and left. Linli glanced at him and didn't ask much. He also knew the operating mode of the Linli building. These waiters were trained by the Linli building itself instead of being hired casually. If he rashly inquired, it would only alert the enemy. The familiar taste rolled into his throat. Ling Li's eyes darkened and his psychic awareness spread quietly. Although it was only a short period of more than a year, with the help of the elixir of Mr. Li, his cultivation had been improving at an extremely terrifying speed. Now he had reached the fifth hurdle of the longevity life. His cultivation was not inferior to that of the snake demon at that time. Therefore, under the cover of such a high realm of psychic awareness, no one in the entire Linli building noticed it. Even Fong Mu, who was stationed here, didn't find anything. No. Ling Li frowned when the psychic awareness came back to him. Although the attic on the top floor of the Linli building was clean, it was very deserted. No one had lived there for many years. Could it be that those people of the Linli building didn't lie to him? Did Mr. Li really travel around? Or did Mr. Li have another place? After drinking a cup of wine, Ling Li suppressed the irritation in his heart. If he couldn't find Mr. Li, he couldn't find Su Li. This was a dead knot. The young man in white at the peak of the inborn realm on the third floor is probably a protector. Thinking of this, Ling Li threw a piece of silver and turned away. After nightfall, Fong Mu finished his practice for a day. He shook his head and helplessly left the Linli building. The nimbus in the city is heterogeneous. It's not good for my practice to stay here. Fortunately, I only need to stay 1 day a month. I don't know when I can break through the longevity life. If I can succeed, I don't have to continue to breathe the dirty air. Fong Mu sighed secretly. After Fong Yuan took charge of the Linli building, he set many rules. Even Fong Yuan had to strictly abide by them. Otherwise, he would be punished. His behavior immediately made Ling Li, who was in the dark, give up the idea of capturing him and interrogating him. Then he quietly followed Fong Yuan like a ghost. Following Fong Mu out of the city, Ling Li was more and more shocked. At last, he saw Fong Mu enter the valley that he missed so much. He was stunned. Here? It was Su Li's yard in the valley? Could it be that Su Li was here? Yes, there were only a few places where Su Li was used to hiding. How could he forget this place? This was the place where he and Su Li spent several months. Ling Li couldn't help breathing heavily. But just after he took a step, 2 rainbow lights suddenly flashed in front of him. The cold, killing intent in the rainbow lights made him slightly shocked. He immediately raised his sword to block. Clang! How amazing was the fight between 2 people in the longevity realm. The loud sound of the collision of weapons immediately shocked everyone in the valley. Ling Li looked slightly serious, but he didn't leave. When he saw clearly the face of the person who attacked him, he couldn't help but frown. The person was slovenly and drunk. He had never seen this person. Senior in the 5th realm of the longevity realm. Thank you for your mercy. The drinker's eyes were burning, and there was a rising fighting intent in his eyes. He said, I'm Yu Wuhai, the 2nd head of the spiritual realm. May I know your name? The spiritual realm? Ling Li was shocked. The Inma cult came from the spiritual circle. The name of the spiritual realm was well known. Of course, he had heard of it. The person in front of him was the 2nd head of the spiritual realm. Although he didn't know the specific status, his cultivation of the second or third realm of the longevity realm was naturally very high. If the spiritual realm was willing to help him to explore the whereabouts of Su Li? Thinking of this, Ling Li gave up the idea of using a pseudonym. He clenched his fists and said, "I've heard a lot about you." Ling Li. Hearing this, Yu Wuhai's face suddenly changed slightly. He was no longer interested. He said coldly, "Are you Ling Li?" Ling Li was surprised. It seemed that this person knew him. "How could it be? It's really you. Go to hell." Ling Li didn't deny it. Yu Wuhai's face was instantly full of killing intent. Regardless of the gap between himself and Ling Li, he launched his killing move to attack. Ling Li's pupils shrank. He suddenly distanced himself from him and said, "Your Excellency, I have never met you. Why did you suddenly kill me? Is there any misunderstanding? Then I ask you, are you the hierarch of the Yinma cult?" Yu Wuhai returned to his original place and said again. Ling Li was stunned and immediately became silent. Since he didn't recognize the wrong person, then, enough! In the valley, a cold shout suddenly came. Yu Wuhai heard it and looked at Ling Li unwillingly. Finally, he restrained his killing intent and stood aside. Ling Li was nervous. It seemed that the person who just spoke had a higher status. That was great. He also wanted to figure out why the people of the spiritual realm hated him so much but didn't attack him when he was weak. Not long after, a thin figure that was tall and straight like a pine tree walked out slowly from the darkness. He was enveloped in mist, causing him to be indistinct, and a faint deathly stillness emanated from his body. It was as if there was nothing in the world that was worthy of his nostalgia. Ling Li felt the pneuma of his cultivation and was puzzled. This person's cultivation was just the third realm of longevity. Why did he make Yu Wuhai surrender? With this question, the face of the person in the dark gradually became clear. Chapter 319. Although the face of the young man in front of him had changed, Ling Li recognized his identity at a glance. He was Fang Yuan, whom he had taught in the valley that year. However, what surprised him was that Fang Yuan, who was only at the peak of the acquired realm at that time, had the cultivation of the third hurdle of the longevity realm in just 3 or 4 years. If he hadn't got the help of Mr. Li, he might have fallen behind Fang Yuan in cultivation. Ling Li was still shocked and doubtful. Fang Yuan slightly turned his face and looked at Yu Wuhai. He raised his eyebrows like a sharp sword. Yu Wuhai immediately bowed his head. He knew where he was wrong and didn't argue. "You, come with me." Ignoring Yu Wuhai, Fang Yuan coldly glanced at Ling Li's slightly shocked look. He suppressed the waves in his heart and said in a calm tone. Before Ling Li answered, he turned around and walked into the valley. Ling Li felt a little strange, but he kept walking. He would not let go of any clue about Su Li, even if it was a dangerous place in front of him. On the way, Ling Li, who looked dignified, suddenly heard a surprised voice. "It's eldest brother Ling." He followed the voice and saw a black-faced young man. He was He in those days. Now he also had the cultivation of the inborn realm. The others were also in the middle and late stages of the inborn realm. When did the cultivation of the people who followed Su Li become so? Ling Li was shocked. But now the valley was obviously controlled by Fang Yuan. If Fang Yuan didn't speak, he couldn't ask other things. He could only follow Fang Yuan silently and stopped in front of a building. Looking at the old but spotless bamboo building in front of him, Ling Li suddenly froze and thought back to 4 years ago. It was here that Li tried her best to kill the 2 elders of the blood refining hall. Then she took him to settle down. It took several months and hundreds of thousands of taels of silver to cure his poison. It was a pity that he couldn't recognize his heart at that time. He didn't know that he hurt her with the name of Ling Shui. It is here. Ling Li's throat seemed to be blocked by something. After a long time, he spat out a sentence and didn't take a step forward. Fang Yuan was silent for a moment and finally said, "If you think so, it's right." "Really?" Ling Li was shocked and immediately couldn't control his temper. He stepped up to the bamboo building and walked to the bamboo door. His hands were slightly trembling as he pushed the door open. Fang Yuan stood downstairs and looked at him sarcastically. There was no hatred in his eyes. At this moment, there was more pity. No matter what happened in the past, at least now, he and I are both pitiful people. Creak. The bamboo door finally opened with a soft sound, as if welcoming a guest who had not been here for a long time. The smell of sandalwood wafted in the room. After opening the door, the scene inside was reflected in her eyes. Ling Li's body shook violently in an instant, and his eyes were full of disbelief. It was a memorial tablet. The two clear and vermilion words, Su Li, on it hurt his eyes. The suffocating pain spread rapidly, and then, a burst of anger mixed with confusion broke out instantly. I don't believe it. Even if you don't believe it, it won't change the truth. It was unknown when Fang Yuan came to the bamboo house. He lit a stick of incense for the memorial tablet. He looked focused and affectionate. I gave him a chance. He really didn't light the incense for you. With such an idea in mind, Fang Yuan seemed to be able to talk with Su Li. There was a trace of nostalgia and warmth between his eyebrows. After inserting the incense, Fang Yuan swept away the excess ash and turned around. He was not surprised to see Ling Li, who was lost. Half a year ago, it was also like this. If he hadn't had an unfinished wish, he would have left with Su Li without any hesitation at the moment when she disappeared. Ling Li. A voice with the spiritual shock of the longevity realm came into Ling Li's ears, which immediately made Ling Li's pupils condense a little. Sensing that Ling Li's attention returned to himself, Fang Yuan smiled coldly. Don't be so useless. I let you come to worship Li, not just to see you make a fool of yourself. Before Li left, she left several wishes. Now I can't fulfill them, so I can only entrust some of them to you. Hearing this, Ling Li immediately sobered up. He stared at Fang Yuan with burning eyes. After a moment, he said hoarsely, Are you willing? He could see that Fang Yuan was also deeply in love with Su Li. If he put himself in Su Li's shoes, he was absolutely unwilling to let anyone touch the things behind Su Li. Hearing Ling Li's words, Fang Yuan suddenly smiled like a winner. I love her. Or not as good as me. Ling Li's blue veins bulged. What did you say? Do I have to say it again? You are really a bitch, Ling Li. Before Fang Yuan finished his words, Ling Li responded to him with a big fist. Ling Li's eyes were full of coldness. Obviously, he was extremely angry. Bang! This punch fiercely hit Fang Yuan's side face in Ling Li's stunned eyes. Immediately, before he responded, Fang Yuan's fist also arrived. His right face was also not spared. Bang! 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 The continuous confrontation between the two men was very tacit. Neither of them used xianqi. They were like street thugs, punching and kicking each other, rolling on the ground like a gourd. Their faces were covered in dirt, and they were in a sorry state. Chu Qingning heard the news and saw this scene as soon as he arrived. Suddenly, his mouth twitched slightly. Fang Mu, who was curious and wanted to go in to have a look, slipped away without looking back. Later, Luo Yichen, who had become the son-in-law of the Mei family, also rushed here and left the valley at the same speed. After Su Li disappeared, Fang Yuan's temper became extremely strange. He wanted to go back to accompany Mei Ruhan, but he didn't want to be unlucky. Both Ling Li and Fang Yuan were in the longevity realm. They had endless strength in their lives. Even if they didn't use Xiangong, they wouldn't feel very tired. They didn't know how long they fought. They only knew that the sky changed from day to night. After several rounds, Ling Li, whose original face could not be seen, struggled to pull out his clamped hands. He kicked on Fang Yuan's face, and they immediately separated. Fang Yuan wanted to get up with a straight face, but he couldn't mobilize any muscle in his body. Finally, he loosened his breath and lay on his back, unable to get up again. Seeing this scene, Ling Li showed an ugly smile on his face and also fell down. He gasped violently, but he didn't forget to show the glory of being the winner. You are not as good as me. Fang Yuan's closed eyes suddenly opened and was full of unwillingness. He also gasped and said, If Su Li didn't give you the elixir, would never. What elixir? Ling Li asked subconsciously. Suddenly, he was shocked and sat up directly. Regardless of the soreness of his body, he said in a hoarse voice, "Elixir? The elixir that can help me enter the longevity realm?" Fang Yuan knew that he spilled the beans, so he didn't say anything immediately. If he really told her, he would violate her last wish and let her down. But Ling Li was also a strategist since he was a child, and his mind was like a demon. All kinds of unbearable state of mind before were just because of the influence of Su Li. Now, after a round of fighting, his mind was clear. Many things came to his mind, and he suddenly thought of all kinds of possibilities that he hadn't thought of before. "You said that the elixir was given to me by Su Li? But the elixir was given to me by Mr. Li." Ling Li didn't know where the strength came from. He suddenly stood up and waved his hand to blow a fine gust of wind, which removed all the mud and water on his body. Immediately, he waved his hand and a jade bone mask appeared in his hand. He glanced at Fang Yuan, who still closed his eyes, and said in a deep voice, "This thing is a set with the one I gave to Su Li in the past. If the other side becomes an ownerless thing, as long as the range is not more than 100,000 miles, I will feel it. But now, I don't feel anything. How do you explain?" Fang Yuan opened his eyes and stared at the strange jade bone mask. He was not surprised at all and still said nothing. Ling Li took a deep breath and forced himself to suppress the increasingly uneasy conjecture in his mind. He continued to ask, "Now I just want to ask one question. How did Su Li die? Have you ever avenged her after such a long time?" "Avenged?" Fang Yuan subconsciously tightened his lips. Although the change of his expression was not obvious, it was keenly captured by Ling Li. "You haven't avenged her yet." Ling Li's eyes gradually became cold. "Who is the enemy?" Fang Yuan felt that he had recovered a little strength. He stood up and slowly cleaned the mud on his body. It could be seen that he was hesitating. He was struggling in his heart and didn't know what he was worried about. Ling Li was very patient and didn't urge him. He silently stood aside and waited for Fang Yuan to speak. But the pair of eyes like lightning still brought a lot of pressure to Fang Yuan. After a long time, Fang Yuan felt that there was no mud on his body to be cleaned. He suddenly came to his sense and looked up to see Ling Li still staring at him. His movement was stiff. It seemed that he finally figured it out and turned to walk to the east courtyard. "Follow me and you will know." Hearing this, Ling Li suddenly became spirited and followed him. As they passed through the gate of the courtyard, Ling Li suddenly saw a lot of toys made of wood. The surface was very smooth. It was obvious that they had been carefully polished. He couldn't help but wonder if Fang Yuan wanted to take him to see a child. But what did a child have to do with Su Li? "Here we are." When Ling Li was thinking, they walked to the door and Fang Yuan suddenly said. He looked up subconsciously and suddenly saw a baby who looked less than 1 year old was playing with wooden toys accompanied by a wet nurse in a small space surrounded by wooden fences. This child, Ling Li was shocked when he saw the baby. A feeling of blood connection surged from the bottom of his heart. His son? How could it be his son? He and Su Li obviously didn't. Wait. Ling Li suddenly thought of something. He stood in the same place in a daze and he was stunned. Fang Yuan's eyes were slightly dim. As expected, as long as Ling Li saw it, he could recognize it at a glance. He loved Su Li as much as Ling Li, but his luck was much worse than Ling Li's. But at this moment, the baby sensed something. He turned his head and saw 2 big men standing at the door. He immediately smiled and showed 2 small front teeth that had just grown out. Chapter 320. Mother? Ling Li's trembling face suddenly stopped. He looked back instantly, but there was no woman or even a person behind him. Who was the little guy calling? The wet nurse, who was taking care of him, changed her face slightly. She came over and saluted. She said in a panic, "Protector, please forgive me. I have tried my best to teach him, but he is 10 months old now, and he can only call mother." Ordinary babies could speak a lot when they were at this age. Some smart ones could even call father and mother when they were 7 months old. She had taken care of a lot of babies over the years, but she had never seen such a stupid one. Except for "Mother," he could not say anything. "I see. You can leave now." Fang Yuan waved his hand. For such a situation he was already used to it. After the wet nurse left, Fang Yuan stepped into the room and picked up the child skillfully. Ling Li followed him. He wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Finally, he loosened his body. He didn't know why he gave up the idea of asking to hold the child. Seeing this, Fang Yuan's expression remained unchanged. He lowered his head and looked at the restless little fellow in his arms. His cold eyes seemed to overflow with tenderness at the moment. He said, "I named him Nian." "Nian?" Ling Li said to himself. It was self-evident who Nian was. "Li told me not to tell you anything." Fang Yuan's tone was very light. It seemed that he was afraid to disturb the little guy. But the unwillingness in his words was enough to shock Ling Li. "But I am not reconciled." "Why?" "She was born with a hard life. Not only did she not think for herself in this life, but she also did so much for you silently. But you didn't know anything about it and accepted it heartlessly. You even resented her because of her disappearance." Ling Li held his breath. He shook his head and murmured, "Resented? How could I resent her?" He just missed her so much that he sped up the destruction of the Dongfang family. After abandoning the heavy burden, he did not hesitate to set foot on the road to find Su Li. But compared with what he had done for Su Li in these years, these words were too weak. Fang Yuan snorted and sneered, "Don't think I don't know what you are thinking. Do you think it is so easy to destroy the Dongfang family? If Su Li didn't make a move in advance, you would have been destroyed by the Shaoshan Palace behind the Dongfang family." "Shaoshan Palace?" Ling Li was frightened and couldn't help raising his voice. "The Shaoshan Palace in the spiritual circle?" A year ago, the Shaoshan Palace was suddenly destroyed by a mysterious force. All kinds of rumors were flying. There were also many rumors in the Yinma cult. At that time, he guessed that it was probably the Ghost Valley who did it. But now, according to Fang Yuan, it was actually the spiritual realm? Ling Li's eyes flickered. Yes, only the mysterious force like the spiritual realm could destroy the Shaoshan Palace. Fang Yuan's face was colder. "Who said it is the spiritual realm?" "Ling Li, today I will let you know how much you owe Su Li." "Ling Li, I will tell you." "Ling, today. I will let you today. Su, Shaoshan Qing. Otherwise, I won't be able to sleep at night for the rest of my life." Ling slightly Ling back Ling was two, but Ling and Ling in she. And Ling Li's pupils shrank slightly, but he nodded without hesitation. "Brother Fang, speak frankly." Fang Yuan was silent for a moment, and his expression was slightly relaxed. He said, "Su Li, you are right." With that, he glanced at the little fellow who was still sucking on his finger. "Although I don't want to admit it, but he's your flesh and blood. Aren't you going to hug him and bring him back?" Ling Li shook his head painfully and said bitterly, "Am not qualified. I'll make plans after I hear what you have to say." Fang Yuan was stunned and said, "All right." A moment later, in the quiet room of the valley's side courtyard, Yin Xuetong served tea to them and glanced at Ling Li, who looked haggard and lost in thought. She didn't say anything and turned away. The room was silent for a long time. Fang Yuan seemed to organize his words and finally said, "There is one thing that you should know. Ling Xian, your maid, almost made Li die because of the fake news. Li's only aunt, Su Yu, also died because of this. One corpse and two lives." Ling Li gently covered his chest with his right hand and nodded silently. Fang Yuan's mentioning of the past was no less than tearing his scabbed wound again. Fang Yuan didn't sympathize with him and continued coldly, "But you only complained that Su Li killed Ling Xian at that time, but you didn't care about Su Li. Her injury was also serious. The degree of seriousness was beyond your imagination. The elixirs you sent were useless. At that time, the doctor even asked us to prepare for her funeral." Ling Li's pupils suddenly shrank and he said in surprise, "How could it be?" Later, "Do you want to say that Su Li was still fine after that?" Fang Yuan narrowed his eyes and said, "Hierarch Ling, think about it carefully. Don't let me look down on you." Ling Li slightly pursed his lips and whispered, Li was a little abnormal. It seemed that she didn't dare to use Xiangong easily. But I was busy with the affairs of the Yinma cult at that time. Later, Su Li returned to normal, so I didn't care about it. Now it seems, yes. Fang Yuan's eyes were burning. At that time, Su Li was like an hourglass. Hourglass? Ling Li's look changed. Fang Yuan immediately sneered and said, yes, in order to live, in order to continue to fulfill your meaningless wishes, she embarked on a road of no return. She gambled everything in exchange for a short period of strength. In a few years, she controlled Nanjiang country and Tianji country successively, which were all to create a peaceful environment for you. But you provoked the ancient existence, so she had to kill it at the cost of her own life. After coming back, her old injury relapsed and she had to arrange the tactical matrix to tide over the difficulties. Although she survived, her life came to an end. But there was only a little time left. She still wanted to pave the way for you. After arranging the funeral affairs, she went to the Shaoshan Palace alone and died together with the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace. Ling Li, now do you know, how much do you owe Su Li? If it weren't for her, how could it be so easy for you to unify the martial arts circle? If it weren't for her, you would still be at the peak of the inborn realm and couldn't completely control the Yinma cult. If it weren't for her, you would have been killed by the old ancestor of the Shaoshan Palace, and your Ling family would not exist in the world. At this point, Fang Yuan's eyes were full of coldness. He said, but these years, what did your Ling family do? Although I can't wait for your Ling family to divorce Su Li and let me guard Su Li's tomb justifiably. But your mother secretly collected the portraits of those ladies in the past year. I don't believe that you don't know. But what are you doing? You only have your revenge in your eyes. Until Su Li died, you never really did anything for Su Li. You don't deserve Su Li at all. Boom! The anger erupted from Fang Yuan's body like a volcano. The momentum was like a cold blade hitting Ling Li. Ling Li's body protection immediately collapsed without any strength. Clang. The long sword was unsheathed and placed on the neck of Ling Li, who was in a trance. Fang Yuan's eyes were full of killing intent. Although what he said was all speculation, but, from the words of the old beggar and Qi Xianqing, he had already speculated about 80% or 90% of the truth. Even if there were some details that were missing, it was not surprising that they were not important. You kill me. Ling Li suddenly calmed down. His turbulent mind recovered like a pool of stagnant water. At this moment, countless memories of getting along with Su Li in his mind were broken one after another. Finally, only the first time they met. In the bright lights, the two met. The girl cried bitterly. The boy was inexplicable and even vigilant. Since then, he had been in debt. Until now, he could no longer pay off the debt. It was better to pay with his life. Maybe he could see her again in the netherworld. That's enough. Everyone stop. Suddenly an old voice came. Then a black shadow flashed. The short old beggar had appeared. His two old fingers, which were like bark, clamped the blade of Fang Yuan's sword. Ding! The tip of the sword was broken. Senior! Fang Yuan's pupils shrank slightly. He immediately stopped. At the same time, there was a trace of fear in his heart. Just now, he was in a rage and lost his reason. If the old beggar didn't stop him, he might really kill him. Taking back the sword, Fang Yuan felt a little sorry. Not to mention Su Li's order, he couldn't let Nian lose his parents just for Su Li. The old beggar looked at Ling Li, who was absent-minded and didn't care about his arrival. He sighed, "Wake up. Maybe everything will turn for the better." Although the voice was calm, it was like a pervasive drizzle into Ling Li's awareness sea, which was almost closed. He suddenly woke up, and the light in his eyes condensed quickly. "Turn for the better?" he said subconsciously, but found that his voice was extremely hoarse and unpleasant, like sand. This was the extreme grief caused by the state of mind. Even if he had a high cultivation, he couldn't avoid it. "Are you the fortune teller?" At this time, Ling Li recognized the old beggar. It was clearly the person who made a strange divination for him a few years ago. The old beggar smiled and looked at them. Both of them were one-in-a-million geniuses, and there were powerful figures behind them. Otherwise, they would never be arranged to be with the two mirror masters and even have all kinds of entanglements with them. However, even those powerful figures would never expect that these two people didn't plant seeds in Su Li's heart. Looking at the current situation, they clearly became Su Li's furnace and let her do whatever she wanted. Of course, all this was based on the basis that Su Li was still alive. What is the turning for the better that you mentioned? Fang Yuan frowned, and there was a trace of urgency in his words. Is it possible that Li didn't? I naturally don't know whether Miss Su is alive or not. But at the last moment when the Shaoshan Palace was destroyed, I sensed the breath of the mirror spirit. Maybe, speaking of this, the old beggar stroked his beard and stopped talking. Ling Li and Fang Yuan's eyes immediately brightened. Since you come here, there must be a gap in your heart. If there is anything that we can help, please tell us. As long as we can save Li's life, we will die for it. Ling Li said loudly, and his eyes were full of determination. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.